And for those who enjoy this channel and would love to support us financially, please feel free to hit that donate link. We'd greatly appreciate it. God bless.
Awesome. Looks like we are live tonight. This is going to be a lot of fun. We got a lot of good, knowledgeable people in the house tonight. So we're going to make sure that we have a good discussion on a variety of topics. Couple announcements before we get going and introduce everybody is we've got a couple big debates coming up this week and a few more confirmed for the future. But the two big ones to look out for next week, Dr. Dan Cardinale, who we got here. Thanks for joining. And Kent Hovind, that is Thursday, 8:30 EST. Is that right, Dan?
Yeah, well, if we're going to be technical about it, it's EDT, but yes.
EDT. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm sure that's going to break the internet. So make sure you're there for that one. And Tuesday, Kevin Anderson and Jackson Wheat will be debating universal common ancestry. So I know I'm really pumped for that one as well. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Looks like we got David Neff, Dan, Jungle Jargon, Dapper Dino with his cool dinosaur CGI thing going on there. I'm always impressed with that.
I take commissions if you want one, but something like that, that's expensive.
I think I might. That's pretty cool. We got Jason here, Otangelo. I hope I'm saying that right, brother. Good to have you. And yes. Praise I Am That I Am, the awesome producer. So did someone just drop out? It looked like it. I think we had John here too.
Yeah, John is here too.
Yeah, it looks like logical, plausible, possible. I don't know. I can't remember. It's LP. I don't remember which order the words go in. Sorry.
It's not always easy. Try saying it 10 times fast. There he is, Brother John. Thanks for joining us. So, congratulations on the 300 subscribers to John and Smokey. We just had boom. You're in the big leagues now. So yeah, why don't we? It's like I said, it's going to be an open discussion. We can talk about anything really. David, you said you had about an hour. You got to get some sleep for work. So what's going on, man? Was there a topic you wanted to discuss or?
Yeah, sure. So hello, everyone. I'm David Neff, and I've debated standing twice now, and we were thinking about doing a second part of the debate that we did on human evolution and focus on just the fossils. So if you want, we could just I can breeze through my slides and just kind of breeze through what I have about that. So if you want to talk about the human fossils and all that, I'm very happy to do so.
Yeah, whatever you want, man. You'll find when I host, it's pretty easy going. So I'll make sure that everybody gets the appropriate amount of time to make their points, discuss whatever topics they want to. So if that's the first topic you want to delve into, awesome. And anybody wants to jump in on that weekend as well. So go ahead. Whatever you wanted to screen share, it should be working for you there, dude.
Yeah, that's up.
Yeah, definitely. Let me just get a full slide. Slide
I think we might have just got a super chat, David, real quick, just because we do have a pretty big chat here today. So
okay,
let me see. George Bond, putting our kids through college. I always say that. Thanks so much there, George, for the promise I made to Mr. Bill Morgan. Good to my word, Bill. Much appreciated there, George. If anybody else sees super chats or anything, feel free to jump in and read them off. Dapper, I know you're good at that, so you always host a good party.
I do really try very hard to make sure all the super chats get read as soon as possible, because I feel like you paid me for it, right? And you're paying standing for this. So I would feel really guilty if I missed one. So
me as well. And with my short-term memory loss, it's best to get to those super chats ASAP. So over to you, David. Yeah, whatever you wanted to
definitely
talk about. Go ahead.
All right, sure. So let's begin. First, I would like to acknowledge the Smithsonian Institute of Human Origins and the Natural History Museum for helping me organize this PowerPoint. So again, as I was discussing with standing in my last debate, common design is not observable, not testable, not falsifiable, not measurable, and does not have any mechanism. However, common ancestry is observable. We do observe speciation. It is testable. You can falsify it, you can measure it, and it does have mechanisms. Sure. So, of course, going back to some of the predictions, if the biblical creation account is correct, then we should be able to trace our origins back to the Middle East around 4,500 to 6,000 years ago. We should have a genetic bottleneck, and we should never find other species of humans in the fossil record. And of course, we do. And this is wrong. This is absolutely wrong. I just feel like pointing this out now. This is well out of date and is never been in the scientific journals. What we do see here is quite a lot of different species of humans and early hominids. And here's a very nice graph of when they lived and how long they lived. And here we see an evolutionary phylogeny of how and when they diverged. So let's begin with everyone's favorite Lucy. Lucy lived between 3.85 and 2.95 million years ago, and is represented by over 400 specimens. Unlike chimps, they were fully bipedal and did not walk on their knuckles. Their brain size was about 380 to 430 cc, which is about a third of that of modern humans. And the Lucy specimen is 3.2 million years old. Here is a geographic region showing the major fossil sites of Australopithecus. Next, we'll just go to Homo habilis, or handyman. He had a height of about 4 feet 3 inches, one of the earliest members of the Homo genus. They were able to make stone tools and had a cradle capacity of 312 cc. Now we're getting to Homo heidelbergensis. The average was 5 feet 9 inches. First to build shelter and had a cranial capacity of about 1280 cc, and he lived from about 300,000 to 600,000 years ago. Homo naledi is next, 4 feet 9 inches tall, cranial capacity of 560 cc, and they possibly were the first to bury the dead. Then we get to Homo erectus between 1.89 million and 110,000 years ago. They ranged in height from 4 feet 9 inches to 6 feet 1 inch. They had a huge geographical range all throughout Africa, all throughout Asia, and up into Europe. And they were very a diverse species. They were actually more diverse than we are as a species. And then we get to Homo neanderthalensis. They lived about 400,000 to 40,000 years ago. They were about 5 feet 5 inches. They weighed 143 pounds to 119 pounds-ish. And they made diverse tools, arts, and even musical instruments. Unlike humans, they did not have a chin. They had a cranial capacity of 1,500 cc, represented by hundreds of fossil specimens all throughout Europe and even all the way into Israel. They cared for the disabled. The DNA analysis shows that humans and Neanderthals last shared a common ancestor around 800,000 years ago. And what's interesting is that when we sequence the genome of the Neanderthals, humans have about 1 to 3% Neanderthal genes, and the Neanderthals had 0% human genes. So they could only produce offspring from a male Neanderthal with a female human. So they were able to hybridize, so to speak. And again, Neanderthal geographic
And then,
range.
David, sorry to interrupt. If you wanted to just start wrapping it up, we can discuss
Yeah.
a little bit of what you presented. And I know Dan in the side was saying, Dan, you probably have about an hour or so, so I know we can discuss a little bit of the genetics as well before you leave, which kind of is related to your first slide on testable predictions anyways, David. So this is good. This gives us...
Yeah, and I have like 2 more slides left, and I have 2 more slides left. Yep, and these are all relevant to that. Again, when we did the Y-DNA Neanderthal analysis, the sequencing genomes of the extinct hominins, again, we found that they were very much diverse. The estimate suggests that the Y chromosome divergence mirrors the population divergence of Neanderthals and modern human ancestors, and it refutes alternative scenarios of relatively recent or super archaic origin of the Neanderthal Y chromosomes. The fact that the Neanderthal Y we describe has never been observed in modern humans suggests that the lineage is most likely extinct. We identified protein coding difference between the Neanderthal and modern human Y chromosome, including potentially damaging changes. Three of these changes are missense mutations in the genes. So again, their genetics shows that they were not the same species as we are. And again, the mtDNA doesn't fare much better. DNA was extracted from the Neanderthal type specimen found in 1826 in West Germany by sequencing clones from short overlapping PCR products. A hitherto unknown mitochondrial DNA sequence was determined. Multiple controls indicate that this sequence is endogenous to the fossil. Sequence comparison with human mtDNA sequence, as well as the phylogenetic analysis, shows that the Neanderthal sequence falls outside the variation of modern humans. Furthermore, the age of the common ancestor of the Neanderthal and modern human DNA is estimated to be 4 times greater than that of the common ancestor of the human mtDNA. This suggests that the Neanderthals went extinct without contributing mtDNA to the modern human. So with that, I think that's a good place for me to stop.
Okay, I appreciate the visuals. I'll just take, I guess, 2 minutes. If you want to end your screen there, I'll just show a couple slides as well, very briefly. And then whoever else wants to jump in after that, whether it be someone who's on the creation side or the evolution side, don't be shy. I would just say with the first slide, when it comes to testable predictions, when it comes to determining ancestry, and Dan is familiar with this, I would say because it's genes, traits, and inherited, and genetics, that's inherited sperm and egg, that's the direct way of determining ancestry. So when it comes to genetics, I would look to molecular clocks, for example, in the mitochondrial DNA. We discussed that last time, David. And you said you were going to research it a little bit, and that was understandable. We do have Dan here, Dr. Dan, who is kind of his field. Therefore, him and I can discuss.
I do have a quick question, Sandy. Over time isn't evidence of change in genes over time.
I would agree that changes, whether it be mutations affecting the genotype, can ultimately result in a change in the phenotype. Yeah, I wouldn't be disagreeing with that. But I think ultimately, my point is the most direct measurement of ancestry would be through genetics. I mean, that's how we would determine, our ancestry as well is through genetics. But what you're saying is I agree with. I agree that, like, I know Dr. Herman Mays would say the best way to look at ancestry would be with neutral variation, that third position codon variation, for example, where it's more so neutral to selection, so those amino acid trees. But I wouldn't disagree with you that I guess, because, a lot of times I find that proponents, I guess, of universal common descent, they'll point to the phenotype when ultimately we need to see what's going on in the genotype, right?
Well, I asked that because it seems like oh, yeah, so never mind. Go ahead.
All right, sure. So standing, here's the question that I have for you. Within genetics, how can we use genetics to determine what are the original created kinds of genesis? How different does the genetics have to be in order for them to say, okay, these are no longer the same kind? Because obviously humans and chimps have about 95% genetic similarity, but we are very obviously not the same kind by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, and real quick, there, David. Yeah, that's definitely a good question. We did talk about that extensively in our first two debates, so we can discuss that too. But I just want to respond to a couple things that you brought up in your slides, and then we can kind of get into other topics as well. But just real quick, and I won't even take as much time as you did, but just in response to a lot of the fossil evidence that you showed when it comes to the Australopithecines, for example, Lucy, when it comes to the Homo genus, whether it's Homo heidelbergensis, Homo neanderthal, erectus, naledi.
Other way around, Lucy was an Australopith.
Yes. Yeah. I'm saying that Lucy was an Australopith, and then also you've got the Homo genus. So in regards to the Homo genus, my response to the ones that you were presenting there, for the most part, David, would be that it looks like, and this is kind of what we discussed in our second debate. It appears that several of those bones from those Homo species, like Homo floresiensis as well, as a major one, which everybody probably knows as the Hobbit, Erectus, Naledi, Neanderthal, appear to demonstrate testimony of serious inbreeding and genetic degeneration. So according to our model, that would be due to post-Babel dispersion of people groups, for example. So you can see here, and that's why I shared screen. Real quick, David, because I didn't interrupt you when you were going. That's why I shared screen here, where it actually looks like this is the case, that a lot of the bones claiming to be transitional, for example, in these hominins, all show pathology, which is consistent with, small inbred tribes post-Babel. So what I find interesting is there's been a recent paper that actually corroborates this claim, which is this paper here, an abundance of developmental anomalies and abnormalities in the Pleistocene people. And the author, if you read this paper too, I got some excerpts here. The author of that paper does point out that oftentimes these bones that are found to be old are also riddled with pathology and disease. So yeah, a lot of these atypical bones, a lot of these anomalous features that are purported to be transitional actually seem to be the result of genetic degeneration. And what I find fascinating is the paper, the author of the paper, he points out that the fact that this pathology cannot be due to chance because there's just so much. Now, I've been accused of saying, he doesn't come to the same conclusion as me. Right, this is due to post-Babel isolation, inbreeding, for example. Of course not. You know what I mean? I've come to a different conclusion because I have a different starting point. But he's admitting that this is hard to explain, why there is so much what appears to be a lot of disease and pathology, which can result in those atypical features. I mean, genetic Neanderthal introgression. So that would just be my response to, and this is commonplace. But even the woolly mammoths here. There's a paper here, dying woolly mammoths.
I'm confused about something.
Go ahead. I don't want to dominate. That's just my brief response to everything that.
Standing, I want a clarification because I'm unclear. So, are you saying that that Neanderthal fossils are predominantly characterized by developmental abnormalities, or are you saying that there's an unusual prevalence of them compared to other organisms that we find in the fossil record?
Good question. So what I'm saying is when it comes to these so-called ancient bones, these ancient hominins, according to this paper, there is it seems to be the case that there's a lot of pathology and disease associated with these bones. Therefore, I'm saying that this most recent paper appears to corroborate my hypothesis that these hominins are not our evolutionary ancestors or cousins, for example, or different species. You know what? I should say I'd say they're 100% human people groups that are just the result of severe inbreeding, reductive evolution, essentially. Because if you look to, what's a good one? So Homo floresiensis, the hobbits, for example, even as far as I know, the evolutionists agree that they were the result of island dwarfism, which I've got a paper here that talks about that island dwarfism and that inbreeding resulted in reduced brain size, reduced body size, and other various pathologies. So I'm just,
I'm still not clear though. Are you saying that most or even all finds of Homo neanderthalensis, or what, let's say, mainstream science would call Homo neanderthalensis, maybe you would give them a different designation, I'm not sure. Are you saying that most or even all of them are characterized by developmental pathologies?
Well, I would say that based on the genetics that shows that they had high levels of homozygosity, and
Okay.
they even conclude in these papers that it was, I've got a couple papers. There's one here, The Genetic Cost of Neanderthal Introgression. And there's another one that actually directly in this paper that titled An Abundance of Developmental Anomalies and Abnormalities in the Pleistocene People. It talks about how the Neanderthals appear to be genetically compromised, high levels of homozygosity due to inbreeding. So yeah, even this paper concludes that those developmental abnormalities appear to be consistent with the Neanderthal. So yeah, that would be.
I would very much like to read that, but I have a quick follow-up, which is you quoted from Eric Trinkhaus saying that there were approximately 75 histologically observable, or sorry, there were about 75 histologically observable developmental abnormalities among 66 individuals that he encountered. But we have some 300 specimens of Homo neanderthalensis. So according to Eric Trinkhaus, about 0.22% of the fossil record of Neanderthalensis is pathological. So he thinks that 99.88% of Homo neanderthalensis specimens are not pathological. So why are you quoting him to say that Homo neanderthalensis is characterized nearly entirely by pathology when he says that 99.88% are not?
And can I also chime in real quick?
We should get an answer.
Well, actually, let me respond to that real quick, because I am screen sharing here, and at least the excerpt that I say, it says 3 Neanderthal sequences exhibited high levels of homozygosity, implying pervasive inbreeding among their ancestors. So it's my position that the atypical and anomalous features in the Neanderthals in general, not just the Neanderthals, but in Erectus, Naledi, Homo floresiensis, Heidelbergensis, the ones that David showed in his opening. It's my position that those features, the atypical features that are typically shown as being transitional, are the result of disease and pathology. Now, Eric Trinkhaus, I'm not saying agrees with my position, but the paper certainly seems to corroborate that hypothesis. And that's not the only, he's not the only one that concludes that the Neanderthals seem to have interbred.
Okay.
They existed in small tribes.
That's not the same thing, though. Breeding with humans is a different question.
So having inbred populations is one thing, right? But you're trying to link this to a supposed pervasive, evident morphological.
Can I just chime in real quick with the question? All right, so here's the obvious issue with the argument. If this were the case that they were representative of post-Babel dispersion, then we should only see them in a small, isolated population. But we don't see that with the Neanderthals. They had a huge range from Israel all the way up to Europe and the Homo erectus, all throughout Africa, Asia, all into Europe. They had huge, gigantic ranges. And
how many Neanderthal specimens have they found altogether?
It's approximately 300.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. And yes, they have found them dispersed. They found them in different areas. From my understanding, they're always found in small tribes. What's the matter? They found 300 specimens. But you know what I mean? It seems to be that the genetics we have with the Neanderthal, and I mean, we're talking about the Neanderthal here, but even with Homo floresiensis, Naledi, I mean, I don't think anybody would argue that these are found in isolated areas. I mean, the Homo floresiensis was found on the island of Flores. I believe associated with the hobbits, I believe, was elephants that also experienced reductive evolution as well.
Yes.
So
hang on, if I can jump in for a second, because that's so relevant question here. Do we have a Floresiensis genome?
I don't believe we do.
No, we don't.
We don't.
But based on
So
their,
how can we say that they're characterized by genetic degradation if we don't have a genome to compare?
well, that's pretty easy. Even the evolutionary community are agreeing that the small brain size, the dwarfism is due to reductive evolution. I mean, you don't need the genetics.
No, it's due to island adaptation. It's different from reductive evolution.
You can oftentimes just look at the
Well,
skull.
hey, SFT, just quick interjection here. If you're gonna bring up the argument that we don't have the genome, then the same logic can apply to every transitional form that we don't have a genome for, that's used as evidence in favor of evolution. If you want to go down that rabbit hole of, hey, we don't have a genome, therefore it doesn't apply. Come on, man.
That characterization.
That's my point that I'm making, is how many supposed transitional fossils that do not contain a genome are used as categoric evidence in favor of.
Right.
No, you're saying for evolution. I'm saying for evolution. Anyway, you're missing the entire point.
Changing the
You're missing the
topic.
entire point. No, I'm not changing the topic. I'm applying the same logic rules to the argument you're inserting into the equation. You opened the door to this point that I'm making.
Standing is proposing genetic
Only got 750
Standing is proposing genetic entropy.
In order to propose genetic entropy, we need more than just morphological difference. We need a genome. We need to know why.
I just want to ask Dan. Dan, do you disagree with your own evolutionary community that agrees that the hobbits were the result of island dwarfism and reductive evolution to explain their anomalous
Well,
features?
that's a bait and switch, because island dwarfism and
Because you're
reductive
saying that
evolution
because
are
we don't
not
have
the
their
same thing.
genetics means that we can't conclude that. I mean, your own side is concluding that
Okay, standing.
Homo
Well, they're two
floresiensis
different.
was the result of island dwarfism.
What was
I
the
mean, you
thing
can
with
ask me
the
a question,
elephant?
but if I can't answer it, I can't answer it. Like,
Danny, you
am I
mentioned
going to
something
get to
about
answer it?
elephants being the same on that island. What was the
Exactly,
thing with
yeah.
the elephants?
Yeah, the elephants on that
so
island.
you're
were the
conflating
result.
two issues here, and
Wait,
I do have
let him
a
finish.
question.
Let him talk. I want to hear about the elephants, then you can talk. Because this backs up what Standing is saying. Go on, Standing.
All right, Cindy, please tell us all about elephants. I like
Tell us
elephants.
about elephants, and then we'll tell you about floresiensis on the islands.
Yeah.
No, these elephants are on the island with floresiensis, and they also exhibit the same characteristics and pathology as the hobbits. They're both the result of island dwarfism. I have a live science article here that says the surprising discovery of bones heralded as a new hobbit-like human species may turn out to have simply been the remains of a human suffering from a genetic illness that causes the body and brain to shrink, according to researchers challenging the original report. So your own side is concluding that Homo floresiensis is the result of island dwarfism, inbreeding, founder effects, for example. And you know, Dan,
you're conflating several issues.
I'm not conflating anything. And you're a virologist. You know that reductive evolution can result in reduced body size.
Keep using that phrase.
Real quick. Reduced brain volume and various other pathologies. And that's exactly what we see in not only the hobbits, but we see this in Neanderthals, we see this in Naledi, we see this in Erectus, we see this in Heidelbergensis. This is my position regarding the so-called hominins. I don't want to talk about this all day. I want other people to jump in. But yeah, the elephants on the island of Flores have also experienced
but you can ask
as a result of island dwarfism. Go ahead.
Okay, you can ask the question, but you can't then say, and I want other people to jump in without giving me a chance to respond here. So
he is responding. He didn't get a chance to finish in the first place, mate. That's the problem. He was talking about the elephants and you cut straight in. So,
all right, next time Jason leaves, I would suggest that everyone else just leave. Jason, you need to shut up.
Mate.
Standing, no, fuck you. Standing just stop. And he asked for Dan to fucking talk. Let him talk. I'm sick of your shit. You fucking keep going. I'm out because Dan is out too. Standing, mute this asshole. You have 10 seconds to speak, this asshole.
Okay, guys, let's do that.
No, I'm done. Jason needs to get out because all he can do is interrupt with nonsense that has nothing to do with anything. He needs to get out.
Go back to your own
Who do you want?
Get lost.
Guys, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this.
Standing was trying to finish what he was saying. He didn't get a chance to talk about the reductive evolution with animals at the same time on the island. You came along as soon as he mentioned elephants, mocking him.
6, 5, 4,
Did someone
3,
Okay, so here,
2,
okay, guys. So here's what I want to do.
All right, Standing. It's been nice until Jason decides to unmute.
For Stanley to finish what he was saying. That's all I wanted to do. And then you jump in like a drunken imbecile
carrying on like a complete moron.
Hey,
Mate,
I'm
go
sober in
back
asylum.
and
Come on,
listen
give me a break.
to the live feed later.
Okay, guys. I think we're out. So now that we got all that out, yeah, there was some interrupting going. I also felt like I couldn't really complete a sentence, and I will say that I allowed David Neff at the beginning to go through all his slides,
Yes, you
and
did.
I just wanted an opportunity to give my position. I explained my position on the Hobbit, for example. Dan, take as much time as you need to answer the question and to make your points. And then afterwards, if Jason has something to say or if I feel like I need to respond, we'll do that. Hopefully we don't
By
have
all
to
means.
do 3-minute responses, but
Good, I
let's.
just wanted to say that.
Okay.
About the element.
So, okay. So there's a few issues at play here, and we're kind of conflating a couple of them. So there's a difference between island dwarfism, which is adaptive when you're living on an island, and reductive evolution. Now, reductive evolution implies that there is a loss or degeneration or something. So in order to claim reductive evolution, you need to have a genome sequence. You need to be able to say, these specific things, these genetic traits were lost. Looking at the phenotypes, you can't say that. So you can look at Floresiensis, you can look at the elephants, and you can look at lots of other fossils that are indicative of island dwarfism. And without a genomic sequence that allows us to characterize exactly what led to that, you cannot make the characterization that it is reductive evolution. So that's the problem I have here, that you are saying, well, your side agrees that this is island dwarfism and reductive evolution. Well, island dwarfism is phenotypic. So you can look at the skeletons and you can look at whatever and you could see that. But reductive evolution
This
is
the guy that uses
genetic.
phylogeny for mutation rates is talking about we can't. So we can see other animals on the island. We can see other animals suffering from the same problem that Homo floresiensis or whatever it's called suffers from, but we're not going to draw that conclusion. But you can draw conclusions from two tiny little bones the size of the tip of your thumb. You can draw a complete animal from just two tiny little pieces of bone, the tip of your thumb, and you can do this on so many fossils. Like you can fit all the hominid fossils into one bag, the whole lot of them. All of Homo habilis, everything. It's just a conglomeration of garbage that's all being chucked together. But you see a transitional there. But when we have evidence of elephants that have got stunted growth and living on the same island as those people, we're just imagining it. But you can bring up phylogeny this and phylogeny that. Come on, man.
Yeah, so I don't think that's a very good argument.
Now, in fairness, I didn't finish before. But,
real quick, and before you're gonna have plenty of time. But before I lose my trick, because I'm writing things down that you're saying you have a problem with me concluding that it is reductive evolution. So let me just respond to those points, and then you can continue. So yeah, so I've got a paper here in an article that corroborates it that says butchered stegodon fossils of an extinct pygmy elephant were found in the same cave where the Hobbit was excavated. An adult stegodon would have stood about 4 feet tall, half the size of their mainland counterparts. Now, when it comes to reductive evolution, as you know, the reduced brain sizes that we often see in like Homo floresiensis, erectus, naledi, that can be beneficial. That's true in certain conditions such as starvation, which would take place on islands, for example, and in small tribes. And the reason why this is because brains are energetically costly. So this is evolution in reverse, and these pathologies and variants we know can actually occur quickly in these types of isolated populations like we see with Homo floresiensis. Therefore, the unique features I'm saying associated with Homo floresiensis, and this is not just me concluding this is the own evolutionary community. So if you want to argue with them, then that's fine, but this is what they conclude. Those unique features are indeed best explained by what I've been talking about since we started, pathology. And also some of these pathologies are seen in modern humans, pygmies, for example. So those small brains and small bodies.
That's a testable prediction.
With hobbits would be explained by island dwarfism, and that's
a testable prediction
right there. Evolution. That's reductive evolution is brain size.
We have pygmy genomes, right?
Smaller for adaptive purposes. That's reductive evolution. Are you denying that, Dan?
Yes, we have pygmy genomes, right, humans? Like extant human pygmy genomes. We have those, right?
Yes, but those
Okay, great.
pygmies don't look exactly like Homo floresiensis, but some of their characteristics
that's my point. So here's the thing. If you're claiming that the change in size phenotypically,
like Homo floresiensis, one that was born deformed or with problems, like, you know what I'm talking about? Like, you're born with genetic problems and misshapen bones. And we see people today.
Guys, I think we need to go to, gentlemen, we need to go to timed responses.
Yeah,
we need to go to timed responses.
And actually, Jason, you seem like you're a little bit distant with your audio. Maybe if you can get closer. What we're going to do then, Dan, is going to take real quick. Dan's going to take as much uninterrupted time as he needs, and then Jason, since you had a response there, then we're going to throw it over to you, Jason, as much uninterrupted time as you need. Okay, go ahead, Dan.
Okay, here's the deal. Here's the deal. You're making a bunch of assertions with no evidence to back them up. So, for example, you just said that I thought I was going to get uninterrupted time. So, for example, you just said that pygmies are indicative.
20 minutes. Go ahead.
So, for example, you just said that pygmies are a result of genomic degeneration or reductive evolution, rather. And we have human pygmy genomes, and you know where they fall out in the middle of the human phylogenetic tree? They fall out right in the middle. They're no different from anything else. If I gave you 100 human genomes and said which one's the pygmy, if you didn't know which specific, like, random genetic markers are indicative of those, or I should say, are characteristic of those populations, you couldn't tell which ones are the pygmy genomes. They're not missing anything. It's just a phenotype. Now, regarding brain size, because this is relevant, this is the second thing you said that was incorrect, is that brain size itself is not indicative of any kind of reduction or loss of brain power or whatever. It's brain size relative to the body mass that matters. So, for example, humans have the largest brains relative to our bodies. Second, and people can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think second is dolphins. On Earth right now, I think dolphins are number 2 in terms of relative brain size. Now, dolphin brains are actually bigger than human brains, but their bodies are bigger. So in terms of relative, in terms of intelligence, we have them beat. But it's relative brain size that matters, not absolute brain size. Let me think. There was something else in there. There were too many I couldn't even write it down fast enough. The other thing was just the pattern of descent here. There seems to be confusion over which things are related to which. And when it comes to things like floresiensis and Neanderthals and everything, we can look at those to the extent we have genomes, like for the Neanderthals and the Denisovans, we know exactly where they fall out. They're actually not within the human clade of all extant humans. They fall outside of that clade. And does anyone here know where the most recent common ancestor falls out? If you consider Neanderthals humans, because we now have full Neanderthal genomes, so we can do that kind of thing. How long ago was the most recent common ancestor for Neanderthals? It's about 800,000 years.
Just finish your statements.
That
and then
totally blows the Young Earth Creationist timeline to hell if you include Neanderthals as humans. So there's a couple of misstatements in there, a couple of statements that didn't have facts to back them up, and just the use of Neanderthals or the characterization of Neanderthals as modern humans, as degenerate Homo sapiens. If you do that, it destroys the Young Earth time frame because their genomes are sufficiently different from ours that you need to go back way further in time to find a most recent common ancestor. And you could even do that if you do the math incorrectly, like Nathaniel Jeanson does it. You still go too far back in time to get a most recent common ancestor within the Young Earth time frame. And with that, thank you for letting me finish.
No problem. We appreciate that response there, Dan. Jason, you now have uninterrupted time to respond to any one of the points that Dan made.
I'll bring up a few of them. First of all, pygmies and a 7-foot tall German, a little dark black pygmy, and a 7-foot tall blue-eyed blonde-haired German are only 0.012% different from each other, right? So they're almost identical genetically. Also, we found there was so many people tested, I can't remember how many, and I think a percentage of them had like 20% Neanderthal DNA in their genome. They need to do more tests to find that out. So saying that they're not human is absolutely ridiculous when they've got tests of that. And then we have our brains. We've got whales that have got massive brains that are way, way bigger than ours. It's the way the brain is set up. It's the way, I mean, we got things in our brains like rose hip neurons that they don't have. We've got, it's a totally different thing. They don't have a language like a language where they can talk about what happened in the past. They can't say, oh, you know, what about that time that we got attacked by that giant squid, you know, a year ago down there's no language there. There's no thing. Their brains are not set up the same way. Our brains are far more powerful and set up to be far more intelligent and more powerful to have a relationship with God. And that's it.
Okay, Dan, did you have, actually, David, I know you were, and we apologize, David, we kind of all took over when you kind of started the discussion. Did you have something you wanted to say there, David?
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me on. I'm starting to go along here, so I'm going to get going. But again, thank you so much for having me on. It was nice to meet everyone. And please, hopefully, you can have me on again sometime soon.
Of course, David, you're always welcome. We appreciate the visuals, and it led to a fun back and forth on some of these topics and hominids. Did anybody else? I know we've got Angelo, Jungle Jargon, Brother John, Praise. Anybody else wanted to make a point?
Yeah.
Anything you've heard?
In order to make this right, you would have to determine that the brain percentage size according to the body was smaller. Then it would be reductive evolution without a doubt. Right?
Was that for me?
Yeah, well, both standing for truth. It was the brain percentage size smaller.
I mean,
You know, if that's the case, that would be definitely reductive evolution.
I think you need a genome to demonstrate reductive evolution. I think that's the point of that phrase, is that you're talking about, I mean, in the evolutionary biology community, when we use the phrase reductive evolution, we're referring to things like the reduction in the number of genes or the reduction in the size of the genome. So we can demonstrate for human pygmy populations that there is no reductive evolution because we have those genomes and we don't see those things. For like Floresiensis, we don't have a genome, so we can't make that characterization one way or the other.
But if the brain size percentage-wise was smaller, then you have reductive evolution, or it's not even related to us to begin with.
Actually, if I could just make a quick,
quick interjection here.
Go ahead.
If you're going to argue that reduction in genes and genome size is evidence of reductive evolution, last time I checked, the Neanderthal genome was larger than ours. So,
yeah,
wouldn't that follow?
Sure. I mean, Neanderthals aren't a direct ancestor of us, so it would depend on what that common ancestor looked like.
No. I mean, what is the defense of your assumption there? Like, how do you know beyond all doubt that it is not?
Which assumption? I don't think I had an assumption that Floresiensis isn't genome reduction.
No, Neanderthals.
Neanderthals aren't genome reduction.
Yeah. We aren't a reduction from them.
Well, I thought they were supposedly degenerate versions of us.
I'm just countering the point that you just made. Is all I'm saying. Like,
but
don't avoid
the logic goes both ways. Just like you making assumptions that reductive evolution only applies if you have a genome to apply it to, the reciprocal applies. It should go both ways, but somehow it does not. From your worldview.
I apologize.
Is the point that I'm making?
Getting the point you're trying to make, because my point is, normally reductive evolution is used as a cudgel to say whatever population, whatever species, they're experiencing reductive evolutions, they're getting worse, even if the phenotypes they get out of it are beneficial in the here and now. It's still a loss of function, it's a loss of information, it's whatever. Right. And it makes them worse over time. But if the argument is that humans are degenerate Neanderthals and they had better genomes, then why are they extinct and we're still here?
I'm applying actually by that logic. But what you just said about reduction based on current advantage doesn't mean that that we couldn't be we lost function but still exist. Like you have to apply that same logic in like all the way up the food chain.
We have lost functions and we still exist though. Like we can't make vitamin
C.
Well,
obviously that would be the entire point. It was that there was advantage prior to that has been lost due to reduction. Doesn't mean you can't exist, but still be having reduction. You literally just stated that you see this, you observe this, that hey, there's adaptation due to the loss of function based in the here and now. I don't understand how that exact logic wouldn't apply to the point that SFT makes on a very regular basis, that we were preloaded with greater genetic function, which has been degraded over time. Doesn't mean that extinction would happen. Doesn't mean that extinction would happen. You can't exist, but there would be a reduction overall. But it still requires there was greater capacity in the past, which is the antithesis of evolution, of Darwinism.
Yeah, degradation.
Okay, I now understand what you're saying, and the answer to that is that like we have lots of human genomes, and we could that's an answerable question. Like that's actually a prediction we can then make and test and see which model comes out on top. So, for example, in the Young Earth model, when it comes
I'm not talking about the Young Earth model. We're talking about the evolutionary model right now. I'm saying you're trying to frame this all in the Young Earth worldview. I'm saying we get to apply the exact same standards to your worldview. And what I'm questioning is, first off, you were saying that reductive evolution can only be proven when you have a genome to look at, and I'm saying, well,
that's how the word's used in literature. That's the point.
If that's the case, then the reciprocal needs to apply to, hey, we don't have the genome of supposed earlier transitional life forms, yet we're doing a arbitrary comparison based on assumptions. Is the entire point that I'm making. The logic has to apply in both directions.
Well, we're not making assumptions. We're using other things then to make the comparisons. We're not just saying like, hey, let's just do it all willy-nilly. Like we can, for example, determine the times during which different species existed. We can look at how they overlap spatially and temporally, going back over however many years. You know, we're not making assumptions because we don't have a genome. We're just using other types of evidence.
Okay, so hang on. So this goes to when you say there's no assumptions in terms of what. Hang on, I'm not done. From an evolutionary perspective, okay. So I want to ask you a direct question. If you do not have a genome and all you have is a skeleton, I give no fucks about what portion of the geologic column they're in. If you have if you have the skeleton of a Chihuahua and the skeleton of a Great Dane, without the genome, is there any way to know whether or not those two animals are directly related?
It depends on the other evidence. I mean, there's
no. What about they're both in rock. No, they're both in rock. This is a direct. No. I don't want you to dodge. Okay, they're both in the exact same. Hang on. They are both in the exact same. They're in the exact same rock layer. Can you know, without a genome, whether the Chihuahua and the Great Dane are the same species, the same animal? Is it remotely logical, plausible, and probable to conclude that you can actually make that assumption, that deduction? Chihuahua, Great Dane, same rock layer.
That's a different question than you asked a minute ago, which was one was descended from the other. And the answer is that if they are in the same strata, which is to say they existed
but the stratas are millions of years, buddy.
Well, let me finish. If they overlap in time, which was how you framed the question, if they overlap in time in the strata, then neither one of them is descended from the other, because nothing that coexists is descended from other things that exist at the same time. Just like nothing that exists now.
That's an assumption.
Is descent? No, it's not.
That's a 100% assumption. You're assuming that's the case, because we're talking about millions of years. So explain the Cambrian explosion.
You said that.
Explain the Cambrian explosion. Per your timeline, how long is the Cambrian explosion?
About 45 to 50 million years at this point.
Okay, so are you saying that per your own evolutionary logic, that nothing in the Cambrian explosion time frame could not have...
Sorry, there's too much. I can't hear the question.
Hang on, Jason. Are you saying that per your own worldview, are you suggesting that in a 45 million year period, that there was no evolution that was occurring where things were descending from and evolving into something else inside the Cambrian explosion period.
No, that's well,
that position is taken. That position is taken by people who defend evolution all the time. Oh, it's a very long time frame, and even though we're seeing completely formed body plans types, they didn't just all just pop into existence. Even though they're in the exact same.
That's not what we see.
Period. Well, I mean, I've read that directly. I've read that directly.
I mean, have you read the most recent stuff on it? I mean, we keep pushing the time back. Now we're getting complex bilatereans in the Ediacaran. So
right. No, you're missing mine. You're missing. No, you're dodging. You're dodging the question.
I just gave you a fact.
You're dodging the question that I asked you, which is, without the genome, can you know over a 45? Okay, supposedly humans evolved from apes in the last 6 million years, right?
8 to 12, probably.
Okay, whatever. 8 to 12. That never keeps changing. Last time I said 6. Somebody said 12. I said 12. Somebody told me it was 6. Okay, so 8 to 12, whatever. So supposedly we came from chimps to now humans. There's pretty significant differences between us, right?
We didn't come from chimps.
Sorry, we share a common ancestor between. Supposedly that happened, which I would argue would be pretty significant levels of evolution, correct?
I mean, yeah, that's
it's so in 8 to 12 million years, we can have the dynamic changes that goes from whatever supposedly came from that we split off from chimps and humans, and that could happen in an 8 to 12 million time frame.
Yes,
but in the 45 to 50 million, hang on, in the 45 to 50 million year Cambrian explosion time frame. Are you suggesting that level of dynamic wouldn't have occurred?
No, I think more than that occurred in the 45 in the Cambrian explosion. I think we got. Well, I should say that the genetic diversity
without the genomes, how would we actually know that those organisms that supposedly came from each other actually came from each other and aren't just an example of Chihuahua versus Great Dane?
Because we have the extant genomes and we can compare them.
No, you make the assumption that it's the extant genome. Is my entire
that's
point.
Not an assumption. See Hillis et al. 1991, generating a
no. Again, apply. Do you have the genomes from anything from 45 million years ago? Yes or no?
No.
Okay, so again, if it was a Chihuahua and a Great Dane, and you don't have the genome, how can you possibly make a comparison without making a fundamental assumption that it is a descendant of it?
You're not making an assumption because you're using other evidence. Now, for
what other evidence other than the genome, which you have stated is, you said that nothing can be determined without the genome in terms of reduction.
What I said is reductive evolution can't be definitively established without the genome.
Well, I want to make one quick little point about Homo floresiensis before I forget, because you're saying we can't really conclude that the unique features were the result of reductive evolution. I want to point out the fact that paleo experts in the in the field that aren't young Earth creationists are offering these various numbers of explanations, and they're pointing to various pathologies seen in modern humans. They're concluding that the small body size and reduced brain size are clearly due to island dwarfism, subsequent inbreeding. Some of them are concluding it's the result of reductive evolution, and most paleo experts from the papers that I've read have classified Homo floresiensis as either a variant of Erectus or
it's descended from Erectus.
But I want to point out too, it's not even just that for us to conclude that the hobbits were clearly human, because we can look at their impressive cultural inventory. I've got some articles here that suggest they had an ability to sail, and most importantly, they've had endocast scans that reveal a modern human brain and their anatomy apart from the atypical features that even the paleo experts in the field are concluding are the result of inbreeding and island dwarfism. Is incredibly modern human looking. So it's my position, yes, that the unique features in, say, the hobbits are best explained by pathology and reductive evolution. But this isn't just coming from my own brain and the brains of Young Earth Creationists. This is coming from the paleo experts themselves. So I believe it's a valid conclusion. and the paper by Eric Trinkos that goes over all the pathology, the disease, the developmental abnormalities seen in the fossil record with these so-called ancient bones, and him even concluding that this is odd because this is a lot of pathology in a small amount of time, corroborates that conclusion. So yeah, go ahead, Dan. I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, I think we can all agree though that the Floresiensis predates Neanderthals and Denisovans. Can we all agree on that?
It appears that you're
independent of the actual years, but can we agree on just the?
No, I would disagree because the genetic data, the fossil
I've got a video.
data, all seems to suggest that the Neanderthals, Denisovans, Floresiensis, Naledi, Erectus, all coexisted, intermingled, and interbred. So yeah, no, they're not. Now in our model,
so I got to push back on you there because we don't have genetic evidence for any of those things except of all that list.
But we have geological evidence for it.
Whoa, hang on.
I've got a video.
Standing just said, based on the genetic evidence, they all coexisted.
Well, when it comes to
he made a mistake.
Denisovans and Neanderthals, we don't have genomes for any of the rest of that stuff.
Well, Denisovan and Neanderthal, yes.
I just want to be clear now. You cannot use
this is coming from your own secular community. I've got papers.
I honestly,
are you going on record agreeing with these paleo experts? This isn't. We're not making.
Look, you can use like an argument from consensus like that, but I don't care. You're making a characterization based on evidence that doesn't exist. We don't have genetic evidence from anything except Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo sapiens. So you cannot say, based on genetic evidence, that this whole big group of things coexisted.
Well, we know that
without any genetic evidence, you can call Homo habilis, which is just a mixed bag of.
We don't have genetic evidence on Homo habilis.
It's all chucked in together, and you can say that that's definitely a transition without any evidence whatsoever, genetic evidence whatsoever. But what Standing for Truth is saying, from these evolutionary scientists, that's a consensus amongst most of them, you're saying is wrong. It doesn't make sense.
I'm going to get the paper I'm referring to from the paleo experts themselves.
I should note that I agree based on the geologic evidence that there is overlap between these things, but Standing.
Well, you just said that they lived at different times. Now you agree that they've
not just overlap, mate. I've got a video that I can show you where the scientist talks about how many that they found all these different hominins in the same place, all together, all these bones, all mixed together in exactly the same place, not separated by, like a column can be 100 million or 20 million or 50 million years, not separated in that column, but in the same dig. So you go right ahead, mate. They all live together. It's as simple as that. If you want to conclude that
geological evidence, I was making a very narrow point that we can't use the genetic evidence to make that characterization. And I would ask that
a lot weaker to say habilis
is
a transitional than to say what we said about them living together, because we have evidence for that. You just have a whole bunch of little fragmented bones you can fit into a small handbag, and you call that just all different bones all chucked in together with each other, and you call that a transitional.
I've got a number of studies here. So it shows that interactions between the so-called new humans, like the modern humans, and the ancient humans, Neanderthals, Erectus, Floresiensis, Denisovans, that are now extinct. The paleo experts themselves are saying that it's not really just a case of simple replacement. It actually now appears that groups of new and old humans, modern humans, and then ancient humans, intermingled, interbred, fought, and interacted in a multitude of different ways, which they are still disentangling. So they're admitting that the more bones, the more fossils that they dig up, the more confusing a lot of the story behind human evolution is. And this, I've got a number of studies here. It's actually overwhelming to think of which one to even read from. But yeah, it seemed that all these groups were part of a large interbreeding metapopulation.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing. What I'm making a very specific quibble here is that if you're going to cite evidence for a specific thing, you need to make sure you're citing the right evidence, and citing genetic evidence for interactions between species for which we don't have a genome doesn't make sense. So I agree.
We do have the genome for 3 of them. That's what Standing was talking about. He wasn't talking about the habilis and all those having a genome. He didn't mean that. He didn't. It might have sounded that way, Dan. It might have come across that way, but he didn't mean that. No, I know.
I do have a question about the genetics
I'd have
here,
to
though,
go back
because
and
if
listen
we're
to it.
saying, I do have a question about the genetics here, because if we're saying that you've got humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Floresiensis, was it Erectus also, all count as humans or degenerate humans, so we all share a common ancestor within the last however many years? If
It's a good question because the
Okay,
atypical.
well, the question is, if all of those groups, not just Homo sapiens, not just extant humans, but all those groups are human, as in we were created as a distinct kind, right?
Right.
Then how do you square that circle with the most recent common ancestor? Because Jensen gets us to, using his not correct math, he just barely gets the mitochondrial most recent common ancestor under the threshold. He can't do it for any other part of the genome. And then you throw in Neanderthal mitochondria and forget it, you've blown right past that ceiling. So how does the genetics work? If all of those fossil finds are humans, how does that work genetically to fit it
All
within the
right,
human
we're not
timeline?
talking about
Well,
genetics. We're talking about a dig where they were all found together. There was like something like 4 or 5 of them found in the one hole.
Right, and you're
just
claiming they're all
within
humans. So I'm
meters
saying,
of each
okay, how
other.
does that work?
So with the genetic evidence, Dr. Jensen did make 2 predictions on the Neanderthals. He stated that either the DNA is too degraded and not reliable. I don't hold to that view, but he did make that prediction. And his second prediction was the Neanderthals were the result of a hypermutating, highly inbred people group
Right.
post-Babel. And this is the same conclusion that Dr. John Sanford has.
That is a testable
Real
prediction, though.
quick, I'm almost done. And this is also corroborated by a number of papers that admit that the Neanderthals had high levels of homozygosity and were highly, highly inbred due to isolation, of course, and founder effects, for example. But your question earlier with like Erectus and Naledi and Floresiensis and Neanderthals too, those unique features that are atypical, and because you got to remember, these paleo experts, they're going off looking for the next big missing link. They're going to look for the most anomalous bones, the most atypical features that are unique, and push those as being transitional. But all of those are shared amongst those various hominins, and the paleo experts themselves are interpreting them as the result of inbreeding, mutation, accumulation, developmental abnormalities. That's why you see like the skull morphologies on a lot of these hominins, like Erectus, for example, appears to be due to genetic compromise. So, I mean, this is the conclusion that we're making based on a post-Babel dispersal and migration. And heck, the Neanderthals could have, I would say the Neanderthals is a good chance they could have migrated before Babel. Yeah, the Bible says that everybody, congregated in one spot, and then eventually God confused the languages and the migrations took place. But there's a few people groups that may have migrated beforehand, and therefore someone like the Neanderthal, which has higher genetic diversity, they would have accumulated mutations faster and at a higher rate before the other people groups dispersed from Babel hundreds of years later. So there's plenty of easy explanations for the DNA of Neanderthals. You just got to look it up.
So this is great, Stanek. That was great because those are testable predictions. Those are things we can actually look at. So there's 2 testable predictions in what you just said. One is that if Neanderthals are a hypermutating group of humans, then we should be able to see more genetic diversity in them relative to extant humans. Not just different diversity, but more diversity. But you also said, and we agree on this, that a characteristic of Neanderthal genomes is lots of homozygosity, which is indicative of a lack of diversity, because homozygosity is when at a specific locus you have 2 of the same alleles instead of 2 different alleles. So if you have a lot of homozygosity, that refutes the notion that Neanderthals were a highly mutagenic subgroup of humans. The second testable prediction here is that if Neanderthals are a subgroup of humans, they should nest within the Homo sapien clade based on extant biodiversity among humans. So we can actually visualize this, and I'm breaking out the yellow pad again, everybody. So here's what the evolution model says, is that you've got a common ancestor at some point in the past. The Neanderthals branch off, and then a different branch is Homo sapiens, and there's subsequent interbreeding between them. And then what the creation model says that Stanek just outlined is that you have your creation event, you've got your common ancestor, all the descendants are Homo sapiens, and Neanderthals represent a subgroup within that. Now, when we look at the genomic data, Neanderthals fall as an outgroup, not as a subgroup. So the genetic data refute the thing that Standing just said as an explanation, and they reinforce the evolutionary model as Neanderthals being an outgroup relative to Homo sapiens, not a subgroup. So those are two testable predictions. Both of them have been tested, and the results refute the creation model in both cases.
Yeah, I highly disagree with that because inbreeding exposes the hidden reservoir of genetic mistakes. So therefore, your Neanderthals, which I've got numerous, I don't think you're disagreeing with the paleo experts and the evolutionary community that agrees that Neanderthals were highly inbred, which explains the high levels of homozygosity. Therefore, if you have mutations, loads and loads of mutations, coming about and coming to fixation, because that's what happens in small inbred tribes like the Neanderthals. By the time we sequence their genomes versus non-highly inbred humans today, for example, of course you're going to see a larger difference. Of course, every single human being today is 99.9% similar, which is why they had to resort to the out of Africa population bottleneck. So what findings?
It's actually 99.988% similar. It's actually 99.988% similar, and I have the reference for that.
What
we are only
would
0.012% different. All humans on Earth. Which
Standing,
kills
what
the
findings would
evolution
falsify your
model
model then?
And
Because if the lack of if you're saying they're hypermutagenic and the lack of diversity is consistent with your model, but then if you're saying they're hypermutagenic, then a lot of diversity would obviously also be consistent with your model. Are these really testable predictions then?
Inbreeding brings genetic mistakes to the forefront. They become fixated, which reduces homogeneity. This is just kind of basic. So
I mean,
of course, our genetics are going to be way different with the Neanderthals. If a subgroup broke off prior to Babel, which is my position, which is a little different than some of the others, but even if they did break off at the same time as the confusion of the languages at Babel, those mutations would come to fixation. While your modern people groups, they weren't highly inbred, so however many years since Babel, for example, that hypermutating lineage and those mutations that have come to fixation could have led to their extinction. But so every single human today is 99.9% similar, like Jason just said, and the Neanderthals are, would you say 97 or 98%?
I don't know off the top of my head.
We are 99.988% similar to all humans on Earth. You get a 4 foot tall pygmy and a 7 foot tall German. They are 99.988% similar, which is a difference of only 0.012%. And I found the reference for that finally. So I can show you. You can Google it anyway. It comes up. Sometimes 0.01.
To answer the question about
and whatever. Yeah,
to answer the question about human and Neanderthal genomes, I've just Googled it. It says 99.7.
Yeah, so that 0.2 or 0.3%.
So Neanderthals are only 0.03% different. So they're so close to humans, it's scary.
And the thing is, evidence from paleontology, archaeology, the fossil record, like Jason was saying, modern genetics, all irrefutably confirm that Neanderthals were in every way fully human. And those atypical anomalous features, not only seen in Neanderthals,
I'm sorry, but no.
So
Standing,
easily explained.
But what's the testability there? What's the
testability of your side, mate?
So, what is the thing that, because you're saying we have testable predictions here. So what is the thing then, given the hypothesis about Neanderthals as a hyper-mutating lineage, what would falsify that view? Because obviously them being really diverse is consistent with it if they're hypothesized to be hyper-mutating. But as we just went through, you just came up with a whole bunch of rationalizations for why less diversity is also consistent with it. So what thing, if any, would contradict that hypothesis?
Well, if these people groups that I'm saying are the result of subsequent inbreeding, founder effects, and the fixation of a multitude of deleterious mutations that have been recessive and came to the forefront due to the inbreeding, but the thing is, this model,
that's another testable prediction. That's great.
Confirmed. Well, how do we falsify what's already been confirmed by the paleo experts? And have you had these papers that go over how the Neanderthals were highly inbred, and that's how the high levels of homozygosity are. I mean, you could say I've got paper on them. The mammoths highly inbred. I mean, this is just what
That's
happened.
not my question. Maybe I wasn't clear. The question I'm asking is, you have a hypothesis here that
Right.
Neanderthals are a hypermutagenic subgroup of a Homo sapien common ancestor.
Right.
My question is, what would falsify that? What would contradict that?
If they weren't a hypermutating people group, but the
What
thing is,
observation would it be? Because so far we've basically
Okay,
eliminated.
hang on,
confirmed.
Dan. You keep making the wanting proof of the theory that's being postulated.
I will say. It's
hang on.
12:50, so
I'm not
gonna
done with
jet
my.
in 10 minutes.
I'm not done with my sentence yet.
I'm just telling you
So
what I'm doing.
if we look for genetic evidence, and it is an agreed upon foundational premise that the Neanderthal and modern human genome is 99.7% similar, what greater evidence do you need than that? If you're going to argue that a less similar genome is a direct evidence of relationship in regards to chimps, then how is the one that is basically the exact same as modern humans not directly evidence from a genetic perspective of the foundational point that's being made?
I think I agree with the point you're making, because they are more closely related to us than chimps, and that's why they're more genetically similar.
Closely related. I mean, let's think about this for a second. Would you argue that what's the difference? Anybody know off the top of their head what's the difference between, in percentage-wise, between a wolf and a freaking poodle?
I think we're getting a little off topic though, because
No, we're not. No, we're not. Does anybody happen to know what that percentage difference is? Or we can Google it real quick.
I think I actually tried to look that up when I was having a discussion.
John, can you say your email in the private chat? I want to set up a chat with you, if that's okay.
I want to answer to this kind of question here. So, like, is anybody going to argue? Are you going to argue, Dan, that? Hang on. Let's just assume that we can. Assume we can both agree that domesticated dogs are the result of breeding from a wolf. Is that a fair assumption?
Domesticated dogs came from wolves. Yes.
Okay, so everybody agrees on that, right? Okay, so it is, and it's also a relatively accepted premise that due to breeding, there has been genetic reduction in dogs that wolves do not currently have. Is that a fair assumption?
Right. Less allelic diversity.
No. I'm asking Dan. Is that a fair assumption, Dan?
I think it is. I think so. The genome size, to my knowledge, is the same, but I think dogs have less. I think that's right. I think dogs have less allelic diversity. So individual. Right. Well, I should say, dogs
it's actually well documented. There's been reduction too.
Well, let me. If you let me,
because quite a few of those little traits. Because quite a few. Hang on. Because quite a few of those little traits are directly the result of reduction in genome and damage to and breaking of genes. Like, this is a known fact in dogs.
Look, you're going to ask me a question? Do you want to tell me the answer, or do you want to let me answer? Because, like, if I get half a sentence,
this is called cross-examination, where I ask you questions, I get responses, then I let you actually respond. So the point I'm making, and where I'm going with all this, is
I'm glad you can read my mind. That's nice.
I'm not reading your mind. I'm asking direct questions. It's called cross-examination. Have you ever followed that logic? Okay. So I'm directly cross-examining your assertion about Neanderthal and human. So if we agree that dogs came from wolves, and there is the wolf is going to have a more substantive ultimate genome than the dog, and it's also a well-known fact in genetics that many of the traits
wolves and dogs. There are many Neanderthals, and is what he's saying.
And there have been breaking of genes in dogs to account for their different traits. And then, as Jason was just saying, there's actually a less similarity between dogs than wolves. But you would never argue that they are not both.
I have an answer if you all want to hear it.
Okay, I'm clarifying. You like to dodge things semantically. That's why
I have an answer for you. You don't.
You like to dodge. No, in our past interactions, you've like
give you the answer.
Hang on, I'm finishing my point here and making it very clear because in our previous interactions, you have tried to dodge on semantics, and I'm not giving you that out this time.
All right.
So
the answer is
one final point, and I will shut up and let you respond. If the difference between a poodle and a wolf is greater than 99.7%, are you ever going to argue that they are not actually the descendant of the wolf, or that they are somehow a completely separate species?
Great.
Go ahead.
So I'm having trouble understanding the question. That being said, let me take a stab at what I think the answer is. The answer to what I think you're asking. Now, the first thing I want to say, because we're now talking about dogs and homozygosity and loss of stuff and genetic similarity. The first thing I want to say is we didn't address the things I brought up with the Neanderthal genome. So I just want to make sure it's clear that we didn't address those problems with the creationist model for Neanderthals. The second thing, because again, like I said,
I'm asking based on your model, not the creationist model. I'm asking based on your model.
No, I know. And a minute ago, we were talking about the creation model, and we just kind of left that in the dust. So the second thing I do want to say is that I would love to set up, John, I would love to set up a talk with you. And if you don't mind, I think Smokey's going to forward my email. So if you get a chance, the third thing is that the answer to the dog diversification question is that, and I should note that this is like kind of gets into different evolutionary dynamics here, and that are not directly comparable to each other. But dogs evolved due to very strong selective pressures that were imposed by humans. Right? Dogs are not representative of natural populations because we bred them to do specific things. So it's a kind of an apples to oranges comparison there. And it's not directly comparable to natural populations evolving. The processes are the same, but the rate and the nature of the changes is different, specifically because when you are doing selective breeding, you are doing what's called adaptive evolution, where
Dan,
don't interrupt me. I'm trying to answer.
Buddy, holy crap! I cannot believe you just opened the door to this. This is quite. You actually have a PhD. Holy shit, dude. Okay,
so I don't even know
let's think about this for just 1 second here. So based on the selective pressure applied by the human, that it's not natural. However,
evolution. Yes.
However, those modifications are resulting in degradation, not addition.
Right,
function,
because selection removes things.
So you just said we're accelerating. You just said we're accelerating evolution.
Yes, because evolution doesn't. Okay,
but it's resulting in a negative. Okay, but here's the point I'm making.
Evolution doesn't have a purpose. It doesn't have a target. It doesn't have a direction.
Did the modification capacity already exist inside of the genome of the wolf as the breeding happened? Did the functional capacity already exist, or was there new function added to?
There are new phenotypes added that were not present in the wolf.
Is there any new genes that have been added between dogs and wolves, or are they epigenetic? Or are they mostly epigenetic variables?
Trying to give you an answer. What I suspect is that there are new alleles within dog breeds that are not present in wolves. Within each breed, you have very low diversity, but within dogs as a whole, I don't know how that level of diversity compares to the ancestral wolf diversity. I'm trying to answer your question. If you would let me do so.
But the morphological changes have been rather dynamic, and they haven't been the result of new genes. The result of epigenetic variables for the most part, or degradation of existing genes.
Are they epigenetic or are they allelic? I'm asking you. You tell me.
No, I'm saying they're both. But
that's always the case.
But the majority is from a reductionist perspective, which means that the capacity already existed. If genes are reduction can be the breaking of a gene. Okay. Can the dumping of genes or the breaking of genes result in a modification?
Have they lost genes?
In some cases, yes, but the majority of it's breakage.
So then that's
Most of it's
sure,
breakage.
But
Most
that's
of it's breakage.
selection. I don't know what the
Did the capacity?
I don't know what the objection is. That's the disconnect here.
Okay, did you say that you're not a geneticist or that you are a geneticist? You broke up there for a second a minute ago. Did you say you were or you were not a geneticist?
Dog geneticist.
Okay, but you are a geneticist. But you are a geneticist,
correct?
PhD
in genetics.
And you guys can continue. I just want to point out in the side chat that I put two separate papers. The one from 2016, Harris and Nielsen suggest that the Neanderthals were highly inbred and had a very high genetic load, 40% less fit than modern humans, they say. And the other paper in 2014 talks about how this severe genetic degeneration probably contributed to the disappearance of that population. So these aren't Young Earth Creation papers. This is directly from the paleo experts themselves. So.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what relevance that is. So my last question before I go, if that's okay, and like I said, 1 a.m., so I'm gonna scoot. My last question is I guess specifically for John, but whoever wants to answer is, I mean, I really do try to read y'all's literature. So like, I mean, I read Dembski and Behe and Jeanson and like all that fun stuff. And I'm just out of curiosity, what evolution stuff do you all read? Have you read? I mean, I don't know. Pick a book. You read Selfish Chain.
So Dan,
like, what do you all read to understand this stuff?
So Dan, as I addressed this to you in one of our previous conversations, is I literally don't read the creationist stuff. I only
about
read
1,000 citations, evolutionist citations we've read, and every single one of them backs creation. Every single time an evolutionist gives us a citation, we always find that it backs creation.
I can't tell who's talking right now, but
I know he'd appreciate this. Because I do read a lot of secular literature and evolution, but I like Adam.
We should have a journal club.
But real quick, because I know you're going to like this. I said you got to go soon. Because the paper you were talking about last time by Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson, and I do read a lot of technical papers from AIG too, and I'm not ashamed to admit that because they put out great stuff. This one, a Young Earth Creation, Human Mitochondrial DNA Clock, Whole Mitochondrial Genome Mutation Rate Confirms D-loop Result. We were talking about this one last time. In his conclusion, where he talked about, let me see. Yes, the only remaining caveat the present result is whether the mutation rate reported in DING AL represents a germline rate rather than a somatic mutation rate. And which is good. I mean, he's being honest, right? Is this?
I mean, yeah. Well, he's being honest in that paragraph.
But so the thing is, I don't know if you got. Obviously, you did read the whole paper, but what he's pretty well saying here is that there is agreement between two mitochondrial DNA mutation rate sets that now exist.
Rates, yeah.
The first set looks right, but you're implying that we can't be confident with a germ cell line mutation rate in the mitochondrial DNA. But Dr. Jeanson here is showing that if you look at the D-loop, the coding region, which is germline, this gave a similar mutation rate to the sets of mitochondrial DNA mutation rate studies that looks at the entire mitochondrial genome, and they both corroborate on the exact same result. D-loop, which we know is germline. So that's what
That's not true. That's a misunderstanding of what the D-loop is. You can't have part of the genome that's germline and the rest of it not be.
Have you read that paper in full?
Yes.
Right, and there's corroboration. So is it your position that we can't be confident with a germ cell line mutation rate in the mitochondrial DNA?
Not from those data we can't, but we've talked about how you can be before using well-established timelines that we all agree on. You cannot be confident in it using the
phylogenetic timelines?
Yes, phylogenetic timelines based on human migrations that we all agree on. Yeah.
No. Here's the thing.
Do we disagree on when the Canary Islands were settled? Do we disagree on when Madagascar was settled?
If
was
we have
1,500 years ago.
We have observed mutation rates from pedigree-based studies where they've
doesn't matter. It's substitution rates that are relevant.
No, because if we can be confident that this is a germ cell line mutation rate, these will be passed on.
Jeanson says we can't.
Somatic mutations.
But Jeanson says we can't be.
Oh no, that's why you got to go reread this paper. He is showing that there's agreement between the coding region, which is 100% germline, the D loop.
That's not true. That is no. Listen, Standing. I hear what you're saying, but what you're saying is not true, because you cannot have. You get your mitochondrial genome, right? You can't say this part of it is germline, but this part we don't know. Like it's a unit, right? So if you're looking at one part of it, either it's germline or it's not. So the problem with the D loop is that it is hypervariable. We know that it's hypervariable.
Right.
And I think Jensen says that in the D loop specific paper.
Which is why he's also looking at the entire mitochondrial genome.
Because people look at the D loop.
It's the same as the D loop results is the point.
Okay,
So we don't
here's the bait and switch he's pulling. You got it. Yes, exactly. So here's the bait and switch Jensen is pulling. He's saying, look, the D loop is hypervariable. So if you look over long terms, you get a fast rate in the D loop. And everyone agrees on that because the D loop is hypervariable. We all agree on that. But what the bait and switch that he is doing is he's doing an apples to oranges comparison. He's then using a 1 generation mutation rate, which he acknowledges cannot
He's working with what he has.
And then he's saying, look, that 1 generation mutation rate matches that hypervariable long-term D loop rate. Therefore, the correct rate is the fast 1 generation rate. That is a bait and switch. And
you guys will never do the studies we need to verify that.
I need to tell you though, because you should know this. He is lying to you. Okay. He is lying to you.
I mean, we would disagree.
You guys are the marks in this con, okay? He knows the difference.
Marks in this
guy has a PhD.
Oh, yeah. Speaking
He
of
knows the
marks.
difference.
So why would he make predictions on not only human people groups, but also thousands of other species where he's looked
because it's a
sets?
Because he is lying to you. And look, before we get into the other things, like you can look at his math and you can look and see he includes all those somatic mutations. And those are not going to be persistent over more than 2 generations because they're somatic. That's the definition.
If really that fast mitochondrial DNA mutation rate is due to somatic cell mutations, which won't persist, because the germ cell line mutations are the ones that will be passed on. And yes, you have a point, and we need to look at
and he says I have a point.
But that's where we disagree. I am saying that we can be confident that we have a germ cell line mutation rate in the mitochondrial DNA, and it's fast.
In order for his math to be right, there has to be 0 loss of diversity from somatic to germline. 0. In order for his rate to be right, every one of those mutations must be germline. You can't tell me you think that's actually the case.
No, but here's
okay, then we agree.
No.
Then his rate is wrong.
Good. Here's what's good. And he says this in his papers that he's actually oftentimes given the evolutionary community the benefit of the doubt. And he's like, for example,
different question. Stay on topic.
No, here's the point. Even if a few of them were somatic cell line mutations, the mutation rate for deep time evolution to be true, you'd have to invoke a mutation rate 20 times slower than is observed. So
that is wrong.
Maybe a few of them are somatic cell line mutations.
That is totally
but it's
wrong.
so insignificant, and he stated this.
That's wrong.
Okay, Dan, I want to talk about. You just made the assertion of people lying. You made the assertion of people lying. So I want to call you out on an assertion you made on Smokey's channel the other night.
Don't change the topic, John.
No. You come out here and talk a big ass game, and you say people are lying and making stuff up. Okay, so the other night on Smokey's channel,
hang on, John. I hear you.
You made the assertion.
I want to give you as much time as possible, and I will give you the last word. But I would like to respond to Standing, if that's okay.
Standing, do you want to have a response back? Go for it.
I don't appreciate you calling. I mean, you can believe that Dr. Nathaniel Jensen is lying, but without him here to defend himself on that, I mean, he's putting himself on the line and saying, hey, listen, this is germline. I'm making testable predictions on 1, history of civilization, 2, genetic stamps in the Y chromosome, which are actually coming true, amazingly.
I mean, not really.
3, real quick, 3, predictions on thousands of other species. And he's challenging the evolutionists to do the same, and predicting mutation rates in people groups. We don't know the mutation rates for. So he's going out and making these predictions to show you that he's not lying. So evolution can do. So just Yeah, I would just say, since he's not here to defend himself, there's no point in calling him a liar.
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, I've interacted with him personally, and he's pulled the same stuff, conflating mutation substitution rates, and won't own up to it. So, I mean, I'm confident in that characterization. And I would say to his face if he was here, and that's fine. But just to answer your question, that just to address that very last thing you said, and then, like I said, John can have the last word, and then but just to address that last thing, so it's the mutation rates refer to all of the changes that occur when it replicates, right? You don't need to slow those down in order to have a slower long-term rate for two reasons. One, you have a germline bottleneck. We all agree that there's a germline bottleneck. Now, in order for Jensen's numbers in that 2015 paper, the D loop matches the whole genome, in order for Jensen's numbers to be correct, then there needs to be no germline bottleneck. That's not anything controversial about that. That is in the paper. He counts all of the mutations and says we don't distinguish between germline and somatic. So he is assuming in those numbers 0 germline bottleneck. That's the first problem. The second problem with this slowdown thing that you're identifying as a problem is that in order for there to be no difference in the one generation rates, even including the germline bottleneck versus the long-term rates, you also need to hypothesize that there is 0 natural selection. Now, last time we spoke when Sal was here, and I forget when that was, but he brought up selection, and he's absolutely right. You have to include selection in this math as well. And I think we can agree on that. But when you include selection, that makes it slower, not faster, because selection, like the somatic germline bottleneck, selection also reduces the mutations that go from generation to generation. So that ends up expanding the date even further back. So that's why Jensen's math is wrong. It's not like a trivial error. He's just pulling a bait and switch by mischaracterizing what he's showing. Now, that being said, John, I'm going to give you the last word. I'm not going to respond to what you say. I'm going to say, I hear you, thank you, and then I'm going to scoop and I'm going to stay to listen to you. But before I do that, I do want to say I would love to have time to talk to you individually, because I feel like we keep missing each other, or we talk in big groups. So I would love to talk. That's all I want to say. So thank you for listening. All yours.
And before you go, John, I want to thank Dan for coming on tonight, especially when, I mean, it started off with a few evolutionists, and right now it's him and a bunch of creationists. So it's been a good dialogue. I've enjoyed myself. I think everybody else has. Yes, you and I, we should have a more in-depth one-on-one on mitochondrial DNA mutation rates, because a lot of things you just said, of course, I would disagree with the natural selection, as Dr. Jensen would say. That natural selection is a thing, especially in the mitochondrial DNA. If you get a mutation there that's detrimental to the organism, of course, natural selection is going to be at play. It just comes down to testable predictions, right, on natural selection and its role in eliminating mutations in the mitochondrial genome. But I mean, I could say many more things. We can save that for a separate discussion, just to give John a chance to respond. And Dan, don't feel obligated to leave. You can respond to what John says. But once again, I want to thank you for joining us tonight and making this a fun night. So go ahead, John.
Thanks for letting me chill out.
No, if he's leaving, I'm not going to make this assertion, because
go for it. Go. I got thick skin.
No. I'll save it for the next time.
You sure?
Yeah, I'll save it for next time.
Come on, I can do it.
No, it'll turn into too much of a conversation. So I'll save it for next time.
All right, we should talk individually, because we're always in a big group and it's hard to talk. So all right, talk to you all later. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, Dan.
Okay, Dan. So I got a couple questions myself.
Well, I wanted to make a point real quick, and I'm not talking behind Dan's back, because I actually said this exact same thing to him in our last discussion on this. He really has a problem with agreeing that we can be confident that we can derive a germline mutation rate. Brother Sal agreed with this too. There's ways, and that's why there's multiple independent studies where you can look at the D loop, you can look at whole mitochondrial genome studies, and if they corroborate on the same thing, then clearly we could be confident that we're looking at germline here. But Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, he's also made predictions on millions of other species, and the species that he's looked at, where we actually have their mitochondrial DNA results and sequences, because there's actually not a whole lot in the database. So he's looked at fruit fly, roundworm, water flea, and yeast mitochondrial mutation rate studies. And I asked this to Dan last time, and I'll give you what his answer was. And those are definitely measured in mutation accumulation lines. So in other words, those are genealogically related. They're germline. And that's by definition, they're not somatic, of course. And yet they all agreed extremely strongly with Jensen's predictions on humans. And that is multiple different species we're looking at. I mean, just look at it. That's all swaths of life. I mean, we're looking at fruit flies, roundworms, water fleas, yeast. We're looking at humans, for example. He's making predictions on millions of other species and predictions on African people groups. I mean, I don't know what's with all the scoffing at Dr. Jensen. I would just say these evolutionists need to, put up their own predictions and kind of just quit with the ad hominems. But that's really all I have to say. And those are things I said to Dr. Dan in our last discussion. So I'm not bringing up anything new. Go ahead, guys.
Right. That's supposed to compare with their claim of millions of years of history,
Yeah, there's no reason why we need to assume a human chimpanzee split 6 million years ago, but now you heard Dan say now they're looking at like 8 to 12 million. And the reason they do this, because Brother John always brilliantly brings this up, that there's too many DNA differences to account in just 6 million years. Remember, they have to all become fixated. Human beings, every single human being, you know what I mean? We're all 99.9% similar, like Jason said, but we're not.
Well, why don't we revert back? If we come from an ape, why don't we get the odd human that reverts back to an ape sort of ancestry-looking thing? I mean, you get that with. I mean, we should get that. Really, we should. There's stuff like every now and then, but we don't see that ever.
And the fact is, I mean, he admitted it to John here. And that's why John just says he doesn't care, because it's true. They're always changing their story. Now it's 8 to 12 million because they know they have to account for all those DNA differences to become fixated. It's just alterations in their stories. And you've all seen, I mean, these Neanderthals, it didn't seem like he disagreed with it at the end there, but these papers are not coming from this hypothesis that I talk about with like reductive evolution, and accelerated genetic degeneration in the hominins. These are coming directly from the paleo experts themselves. These papers on Homo neanderthals being highly inbred, right from the secular literature. This isn't made up by Young Earth Creationists. So if they want to disagree with their own community and their own paleo experts, sure, go take it up with them. But
what drives me up the wall about the assumptions that get in the moving of the goalposts, and I made this similar analogy earlier, or comparison. But anybody ever watch Austin Powers? Do you remember Mini-Me?
Of course.
If you didn't have his genome and you found his fossil, could you possibly tell whether or not he was human? And the same thing applies to anybody else with that same genetic disorder.
Right.
If you go, and I've done this, if you go and look at skeletons and Google this, go Google skeletons of little people, and there's dramatic there's similarities, but there's also dramatic abnormalities. Right.
Big time.
And again, when Dan and all of the evolutionists the genetics is the real evidence.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I'm like, okay, well, 99.9% of your evidence has no genome, and we're doing comparisons based on the geology or the paleontology, and you start inserting those other things. Do any of those apply genetics to the equation?
Yeah.
No, they don't. Oh, really? Well, you just stated that genetics is what you should actually be looking at.
Do you know how they said we had a tailbone? This is just quick. I won't be long. I'm not going to go on. I promise you.
Go ahead, Jason.
But you know how they said they have a tailbone. We had a tailbone. Well, there's a monkey that we're looking creature we're supposed to have come from. Now, the evidence for them to draw this, they draw this entire creature and this entire fable around this monkey, and they get all of it from just two bones, literally the size of your thumbnail. two bones the size of fragments of bone the size of your thumbnail. They draw an entire creature, and this great story about how it evolved, and unbelievable. And he sits there talking about us.
I've got a whole section in my book on like Nebraska Man, Piltdown Man. Nebraska Man was based on one tooth. Turned out it belonged to an extinct pig, but yet they had a whole story about, you know, not only what this Nebraska Man looked like, but what his family looked like and his wife, all based on a tooth that turned out to be from a pig. And then you got Sediba and Habilis, which are just artificial taxons. Erica made a video recently trying to say that, you know, Standing for Truth has a made-up hypotheses on Sediba, and it's so funny because a paper from their own paleo experts by Ben, and well, I posted it in the community, so to not bore anybody, go look at it. You know, they agree that this is an artificial species. A mixed. This happens all the time, even in your Australopithecus afarensis. You'll get, well, for example, they finally admitted to a baboon bone being associated with Lucy for, I think it was 40 years. But it's happening all the time. These bone beds are intermingled with sometimes over 90 different species. So yeah, like you said, Jason, you're getting a lot of mixing of different bones. That's why when you look at Sediba, who they say is their best transitional, you've got the paleo experts themselves call it anatomical contradiction because they have hands that look exactly like humans, identical to humans, but yet their shoulders and their upper body and their skull and brain looks exactly like
feet.
And feet. So it's like feet. Pokemon, you know.
I've seen fossilized ape feet. I've seen so-called transitional. Matt showed me once a photo of a so-called transitional on its way to being human, and I compared the foot to a like I googled a human foot bones, and I put them side by side, absolutely identical in every single way, and I was shocked.
It's, well, I almost fell out of my chair, and I'm glad John jumped in and pressed Dan on it, because when he said that, you know, because clearly, okay, the hobbits, everybody agrees, okay, on both sides that they were the result of island.
But the point is, Standing, is that they've got fossils of human feet, and instead of admitting that they're human feet in the fossil record, that they found humans in the fossil record, they call it an ape transitional, and it's identical, 100% identical to a human feet of today, modern humans.
It's circular because they're going to say, okay, you know, Homo sapiens or the Homo genus, we know, that's what they say, we know they didn't coexist with the Australopithecine. So therefore, when they find footprints in Crete or the Laetoli footprints, for example, or just bones that are clearly Homo, they have to deny that and categorize it as some other species because it's circular. They can't question their basic premise, right? So they know in their mind that the human species didn't coexist with the Australopithecine. So those human footprints, which look identical to human footprints, those aren't human footprints. That's their circular logic. Just with Dan, he always says we got to look at substitution rates, and we have to assume the deep timeline. We have to assume human chimpanzee split. But real quick before I lose my train of thought, I love how John pressed Dr. Dan there on it, because he wanted to deny the fact that the hobbits were the result of reductive evolution because we don't have their genetics. So let's bring in Snake Was Right Here, Emo, and Aaron Ra, who base all their arguments on fossils, which have no genetics, and we try and point that out all the time. If every single dog breed went extinct today and we dug them up 2,000 years from now, you're going to get all sorts of stories, all sorts of interpretations. For one, they can't look at fossils in the fossil record and determine what is the result of ancestry and what is the result of convergent evolution. They can't. There's no way without genetics. And so it's funny. They'll use fossils when it fits them, but now they won't use fossils when those fossils clearly show pathology and disease and deformities. No. Now they have to dismiss that because it's contradictory to their story.
I've got a video of that dentist that used to be an evolutionist talking, and he's studied many bones and been to digs, and he was talking about a dig where he found, I think, 4 or 5 different hominids all in the same dig, like within meters of each other. So they're living with each other, these creatures. They're living with each other. How can they evolve into each other? And their rescue device is, something pathetic like, "Oh well, they don't evolve into each other." It's like it doesn't even make sense.
Well, did you notice he admitted to that so he said, "Well, standing, they all lived at different times and they didn't coexist." And then I showed him from the paleo experts himself in his own evolutionary community that the evidence suggests they all did coexist, intermingle. That's why there's different theories like the multi-regional theory, the out of Africa theory, for example, because of that evidence. And then suddenly he started to agree, well, I agree, they all live together. So it seems like the story is just constantly changing. But Brother John, you pressed him good.
Contradicted himself.
Well, what gets me so irritated is the use of phylogeny intra-species, or even intra-family, right? The species not like intra-family. Like, really? So there's some similar building blocks. Okay. But there's gigantic differences. Okay. So you guys wrote an algorithm to figure out how many steps it would have taken for this to become that. I can literally write an algorithm to do that for literally anything. Like, congratulations, boys. You know the logic rules I have to follow. Sweet. Now let's figure out how many random changes it would take in order to get from A to B. Like, are you kidding me? You can apply that logic to literally anything that has a syntax. I mean, you can do this. This is not rocket science. Like, the same logic has been applied. If you don't believe me on this, think about the stupid monkey experiment, the monkey and Shakespeare experiment. If monkeys hit enough, keyboards, will it turn into X? Like, hello, this is exactly what's being applied to in phylogeny, intrafamily phylogeny. You're like, this is exactly what's happening. This is the argument that you're making. And I'm supposed to take you seriously on that because you wrote an algorithm to figure it out and ran it through a supercomputer. Genius. That's genius, guys. I do not take you seriously. That is so dumb. And there's even papers on it from a simulation perspective in terms of like, wait a minute, when we actually apply this logic that we're supposedly using to extrapolate out family trees, when we do it in reverse in simulation, it doesn't work. It fails miserably. And there was a paper on this year that it fails miserably when you try to do the reciprocal, following their exact logic that they supposedly are using in order to reach their conclusions. And I'm supposed to take this seriously? I mean, and then you not only is the models they're using not living up to their own verification, in the things that were being presented as absolute fact, as has been established tonight, they don't even have the original DNA to do the comparison on. Think about this, folks. This is like saying the forensic scientist for a crime is like, you know what? That is the fingerprint. Because they took your fingerprints at the police station, but he's comparing it to literally nothing from the crime scene. What would you say about that being presented as evidence of your guilt? I yield.
Yeah, you'd be wanting payback. You'd be pissed off. That's for sure.
They always say like we're not descended from chimps. Yeah, well, you got to ask them. Well, we're not descended from monkeys, right? Yeah, but do we have a common ancestor with monkeys? We're supposed to have a common ancestor with chimps, but
yeah, we do.
What is that? Okay, so yeah, we're not descended from monkeys either, right?
Jason, he's our missing link.
But we do have a common ancestor with monkeys, according to the evolutionary theory. What is it? It's a monkey.
You know what I really want to know, and I've never been able to get an evolutionist to answer this freaking question. It drives me at the wall. Okay, so supposedly we have fossils from a billion years ago plus, right? If supposedly the common ancestor between chimps and humans existed no later than 12 million years ago, why is there zero fossil evidence for that entity? Supposedly there's all this evidence for the transitions from it to us.
Great point.
Right, and from it to monkeys. Where the heck is the evidence of the common ancestor before the two?
Yeah, those nodes. They infer those nodes on those
do we
charts. They admit they don't exist.
the nodes do not exist.
Right? Isn't that hilarious?
So if no node exists, you have no node, man. Like, right. So you have all these transitions, but no node. Right. So to my earlier point of, you are making these supposedly forensic analysis comparisons. You're jumping the node to reach your conclusion, but claiming that your model is valid. And the point I make in many of my arguments of, in any other context, you would be considered an idiot to make this kind of argument. You would be fired. I mean, think about this. Think about if an architect was like, oh yeah, guys, here's how we're going to build this skyscraper, but yeah, I'm just going to leave out the portions of the blueprint that have the weight bearing structures,
the foundation
supports. Like, let's just leave the weight bearing supports out of the equation on the blueprint. I mean, you would be considered insane, right? And after that building collapsed and people died, you'd be thrown in prison, right, for being a complete incompetent fool. But in context of the science, supposedly, quote unquote science, about our very existence, we're supposed to suspend that rational component to the logic flow and then just be like, this is how it happened. And obviously, and I won't get into this diatribe tonight, but and then that's before you even account for abiogenesis. So I mean, come on, folks.
Yeah,
seriously, use your brains for one moment.
Well, and you bringing up the dogs was a great point too, because and I brought this up with RJ Downard too, and the fact that they can't distinguish between like convergent evolution and recent shared relationship in the fossil record, because there are oftentimes, you can see this in the dog breeds and the Canis domesticus, you see there's more variation oftentimes within the exact same species. Okay, more variation within the same species, just think about that, than between or across species. Those ones within the same species are closer related than the ones that are between different species, for example. So when you look in the fossil record now and you're just looking at a bone without the genetics, which suddenly he wanted to look to, it's impossible to distinguish relationship, like you said, with the Great Dane and the Chihuahua and a wolf. You're not going to know if you just have the bones. There's no way to determine clear relationship boundaries. So the fossil records are really, it's bad for them.
Oh, but yet you having an island with animals that have got this dwarfism and people together, that's not evidence.
Right.
That's not evidence, but everything else is.
Well, remember
two little bones the size of your thumbnail is evidence of our ancestor. But what you just said with all the evidence from that island is not evidence at all, according to Dan.
You've got pygmy elephants on the same island as the hobbits, which both are agreed upon by the paleo experts to be the result of reductive evolution and island dwarfism. That explains the small body sizes, the small brains, but they hate creation. They hate biblical creation so much that now they have to disagree with their own experts in the field, semantics. That's why it's almost like when I do debates from now on modern day debate, I'm so sick of the semantics after 60 debates I think I've had. I just want just equal, openings, 12 minutes, 10-minute rebuttals, a 5-minute rebuttal, because I'm just sick of the semantics and disagreeing with their own conclusions in their own,
because it doesn't help them at that particular time in that particular debate.
In that particular time, so now they have to play a game. It's just I don't know. I'm getting a little frustrated with it. You too, I'm sure.
John's analogies are awesome too. By the way, the things that he just came up with, that's brilliant. I mean, that really killed it.
John, all you got to do is point out the fact that there's no evidence for those nodes, and it's like, okay, and then the genetics kills them too. Once you get into genetics, now they're, they're best. Go ahead, John.
Well, I mean, it's why I'm like, Dan, what is your degree in? Like, what is your doctorate in? It's in genetics.
Virology.
So, I mean, it's virology. I mean, especially, I guess, especially is in virology or whatever. Right. I've read his dissertation. I mean, I've read it. I know what he says in it. It's like, dude, you're not that dumb. You know that what we're talking about applies to the question. And I'm not going to bring it up right now. We'll in our next interaction. But like the thing that I was going to call him out on, it's like, dude, I know beyond doubt you're not that dumb unless somebody else wrote your dissertation. So why are you making some of these points? I mean, I'm just using him as an example, but we see the exact same thing across the board. And it's like, how are you actually making this argument with a straight face while claiming to be an expert in, XYZ? It just drives me up the wall. I mean, you're the level of con artist that is becoming a mandatory skill set for the evolutionary biologist is beyond the pale at this point. I mean, you either have to be ignorant of the evidence against your position or actively attempting to spin it so that your entire foundation of your professional standing does not just get eviscerated and just poof, go up in smoke. I mean, good luck on that funding. Good luck on that, that teaching position. Good luck on that lab you're getting to utilize for your, little experiments that have no positive bearing. Like, I mean, think about this, folks. Okay, let's assume we're created. Let's assume that there is ordered structure and a top-down logic. And what is attempting to be discovered in evolutionary biology is literally the direct antithesis to this. What do you think they are actually going to discover that's positive benefit? Actually, nothing. You're going to slow down the positive benefit. And think about this. How many discoveries that have been made in biology in the last 100 years have literally been the result of accidents? Not figuratively, literally. Many of them have been the result of accidents because they weren't looking in the right pattern, in the right mindset, in the right worldview and strategy. So they're finding out things by accident. It fascinates me, what's going on. Enough of my tangent there.
Anybody else have any points to make that haven't talked as much? Praise. What were your thoughts on that entire interaction, which I thought was a blast? I had a really good time there. What are your thoughts, Praise?
I liked how John just completely wrecked his night because I think he was trying to use obfuscation to try to smuggle in his evolutionary paradigm. So we need people like John that can, refute that. We need people that know how to handle that, like you, John, maybe Neff and some other people. But yeah, I thought it was kind of dishonest, underhanded, some of his tactics. So I mean, that's what.
Well, especially with people like Dan, is I like to, and John's the same way. And even though I read a lot of Young Earth Creation literature too, I also read a lot of everything in regards to the human evolution that we were debating tonight. I was using nothing but information and papers from the secular community, from the paleo experts themselves. So when they disagree with the argument that we're using, they're just disagreeing with their own side. But in the moment, like Jason said, they have to. Because if they're cornered, or like, for example, his entire argument tonight was about the Neanderthals, the genetic differences. The genetic differences is not even that high. It falls within the variation of humans. And the accelerated genetic degeneration, which would lead to the fixation of numerous numbers of deleterious mutations, they become fixated, which would reduce homogeneity. And that's exactly what these paleo experts conclude. Neanderthal genomes had high levels of homozygosity. So that 0.2% difference from Neanderthals and modern humans, perfectly explained by the accelerated genetic degeneration. And it was almost like near the end there, he had to it almost seemed like he was misunderstanding the genetic consequences of severe inbreeding. That's what happens. Inbreeding reveals the hidden reservoir of genetic mistakes. And with these small tribes like the Neanderthals, Erectus, Naledi, hobbits, that subsequent
Looks,
inbreeding
intelligence,
comes
and
to a lot
stamina.
of genetic mistakes that have been accumulating. Even according to the evolution model, they explain all genetic diversity as a result of mutations. That's why their out of Africa scenario, that population bottleneck, is so detrimental, because they already have millions of years of mutation accumulations. Now they have a bottleneck of severe inbreeding. Okay, boom, you've got unlimited amounts of recessive mutations coming to the forefront, leading to accelerated genetic degeneration. Our model has an opposite explanation for the origin of genetic diversity. We look to the created heterozygosity. So sometimes you got to argue with them from their own model, and that's kind of what John was doing too, just showing how logical it is.
What just gets me, that point you were making about like, oh, you're just resorting to creationist literature. I mean, I've heard that so much. I've heard it from Erica. I've heard it from RJ. I've heard it from insert person. And it's like, I don't know how many times I have to tell you that is not the source of my argument. The source of my argument comes from looking at the requirements from a objective perspective, not based on, oh, it must have evolved. And just saying, what is the function that is required? And then using my IQ to reach a conclusion based on known parameters. And reading a paper and just being like, I'm going to ignore when it says, oh, it must have evolved from this, when they have no evidence that it actually did. It's pure hypothesis. And just be like, okay, what is this actual thing that they're claiming evolved? What's the function that it does? Wow, that's really cool. Holy crap, it's like a computer circuit. Well, that's awesome. Oh my goodness gracious, it can control quantum state. That's awesome. And you just start to extrapolate out the different, oh my goodness gracious, these types of genes, they have if-then time-based variable control of outcome. Let's think about this. What do you have to know in order to have a time-based variable? You have to know what the expected end outcome is before the outcome happens in order to account for the outcome that has not yet occurred. I mean, what does that require? An intellect. Okay, cool. I mean, you just extrapolate out this logic. It's not that difficult. And then you begin to look at the rest of the systems that exist, and it's like, okay, well, pretty much all of these have a foreknowledge requirement. So if the foreknowledge requirement applies from the molecular level and the code requirement all the way up to the physical application of that into a macro level system, I'm going to conclude there was a designer, and that the assumptions being made about evolution are false. I mean,
well, the other night I went through. I did even a hangout on it. I went through all the evidence that there is of evolution on the internet. They're all basically saying the same thing, and they're all depending on mistakes, copying errors to write instruction that's not there. And there is no other evidence of evolution. There is no mechanism for evolution, because if you're changing what's already there, you're altering, different what's there already there, proteins or whatever. That's not writing vast amounts of instruction that's required for evolution. That's not there.
Well, and I will publicly make this gamble that number one, it's already well recognized that the full data requirement for body plans is not housed exclusively in the DNA. Like, this is a recognized premise. I'm going to go ahead and just gamble publicly. We don't know all this stuff yet. We're gaining information on a daily basis. But I'm just going to gamble that what is being discovered in epigenetics, the glycomics, and histone code, among others, I am going to wager that in the very, very near future, it will be confirmed beyond doubt. There's already a suspicion. It will be confirmed beyond doubt that the actual structure of our systems are controlled, not exclusively, but the huge portion of it is controlled separate from the genome. And when that conclusion is reached, then the entire premise of evolution is a joke. If huge portions of what is life is not controlled by what they claim copying errors resulted in, then I'm sorry. If you continue to claim that that is a remotely plausible explanation, I barely take them seriously now. I will actively push for them to be locked in the padded cell if they continue that position.
Yeah, and anybody who teaches it.
Well, they actually, that's right. It's borderline insanity to say that the accumulation of copying errors akin to typographical errors in a text is going to take a single-celled like organism into something like a whale. As a matter of fact, all the complexity of life over billions of years, that's why they need time. But that's just ridiculous. And it made me, because Dapper Dino started by asking differences in phenotype and genotype. And the funny thing is that's where the evolutionists often overlook. They'll look at phenotype, which is just your physical features, and they'll look at what's occurring at the phenotype level, and they'll say, oh, look at these changes, look at these adaptations, this is evidence for large scale evolution, when in fact, no, we want to look at the genotype. We want to look at the molecular level to see what's actually happening. That's why when they look to, and John and I were discussing this in our debate with what's his name, Team Skeptic, they look to malaria resistance in humans as evidence for like a truly beneficial mutation, when in fact that benefit is due, if you look at the genotype, it's due to a broken cell and a loss of information. Therefore, and this goes for the majority of beneficial mutations that they point to, these changes and adaptations were at the expense of, in the case of sickle cell anemia, a pre-existing protein. They're oftentimes at the expense of pre-existing functional systems. Antibiotic resistance, for example, is typically due to a loss or the breaking down of regulatory proteins. Like this is a trend in the changes that we see. Like we are seeing things going downhill. And that's why I always point to the front-loaded genetic diversity model, because that's what we're seeing. We're seeing changes since creation that are downhill, and yet they point to those changes. When in fact, when you look to the genotype, and I found that interesting that Dapper Dino even mentioned that, they're always deleterious or just epigenetic, just general organismal adaptation from environment, which is based on pre-existing built-in systems. That's not evidence for fish-to-fisherman evolution. I mean, they are at a really serious loss right now.
Dan made a point tonight, which I was actually surprised. He actually had the, I guess he wagered or didn't even think about the significance of this, or thought I wouldn't pick up on it. He literally made the point that positive mutations often are the result of dumping of genes. And it's like, okay, what is the requirement? If you're viewing this as a positive mutation, you have to look at what the requirement for that result was. And if it is the dumping of pre-existing function, that is a deprecation of capacity, not an increase. But you still conclude that is from an evolutionary, not from the what happened in the moment in terms of the survival of that particular organism, but from the evolutionary worldview. If you're classifying that as a positive, you have reverse logic in, like, how is that not a fatal error in the logic flow of your model? Like, oh, hey, so we had to have more before to consider this as a positive, but I'm going to claim that we're gaining information from losing it. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like, you're actually making that assertion with a straight face. And you have a PhD. Well, I'm not directing that just to Dan. I'm talking about like the PhDs across the globe that make that assertion. It broke. It has less information. That's a gain.
Breaking down pre-existing systems for adaptive purposes is not going to take a single-celled ancestor into a whale over billions of years. And that's why typically when you point this out, the silliness of it, then they have to resort to semantics. Well, what is a loss of information, or what's your definition of information?
Yep.
to avoid
Hey,
the
dude,
obvious.
you had a rifle or you had a shotgun. You cut 8 inches off of the barrel. Now you have a short-barreled shotgun. Do you think it still has the ability for you to be able to hit birds that are flying? Yes or no? Like, it's a loss of capacity. Now, it's
Well,
really great for shooting the criminal inside of your house. Cool. Or you're gonna like go around a bank. Awesome. But you can't go use it for hunting anymore.
right.
I mean, this is not rocket science. I just don't get it of how people actually believe this stuff. And it's like, are you suspending? It goes back to the like, are we actually getting dumber as a species? Which obviously the evidence shows that we are. Yes, we are getting dumber, which would explain portion of this.
Depends on them. Yeah, we're getting
But
dumber.
it's like, I mean, studies are showing that IQ is plummeting. Okay, well, I would say people's expansion and belief in this is proof of that.
Well, let's pretend, and I did this recently, so this analogy came to me. But let's pretend we wanted to make the dining room in our homes larger, and so we did this by knocking out the interior wall. Would we then say we built the house by knocking down the wall? Of course not. That's what the evolutionists are saying. You know, we got a bigger room by knocking out a pre-existing wall. Therefore, this is how we built the wall in the house. So they're looking at all these changes that are deleterious, reductive. Lenski's E. coli experiment is one of my favorite. I love reading those papers on how these E. coli bacteria have lost genes for short-term adaptive purposes, but it's long-term genetic degeneration. That's not going to explain how the information came about.
In SFT, let's explain to the audience what you're actually referring to. I'm talking about from a practical perspective, right? So they had the capacity based on environmental variable and they had a logic gate, gene regulatory control for this of like, hey, in this scenario, only eat glucose, even if both are available. In this scenario, if the other one is not, then eat sucrose or whatever. I forget the exact. It was glucose and sucrose, wasn't it?
Yeah, citrate or yeah,
or citrate. That's right. It's like, okay, what happened in the supposed positive benefit mutation? Oh wait, that regulatory control broke, and they could no longer determine which one was better, and it was basically into a fixed on position to only do this one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wait a minute. So you had the capacity to exist on 2 different variables and to account for 2 different environmental factors. Now you only have the ability to operate in one.
Right. It's a reduction in specificity. It's not taking things forward, but that's actually you just explained it perfectly. The point is, yeah, we can get some genuinely nice changes by knocking out genes and breaking functional systems. But it's still all downhill, like you just said. It's lost in specificity. It's no longer able to do what it did before. This is all starting. This is like a top down. It's like we started from the top and we've just been going down ever since. And yeah, you know, these adaptive gains can be seen at the result of a net loss of fitness, a net loss of information. I mean, why can't they see this? I don't get it.
Well, it's because they have to operate from a bottom up instead of a top down worldview, even while suspending the fact that their bottom up worldview is not remotely plausible.
Well, and that's what annoys me about Speed of Sound, you know. John, the name that should not be mentioned, Lord Voldemort. And did
you see that he's going to be the speed of puddings?
yeah, he's never going to live that down, is he? Has he ever brought one valid argument? Like, it seems like all he does is complain. See, they just will not question that basic premise, that basic paradigm. And he literally said that, standing for truth. I read the papers that he cited, and the authors didn't come to the same conclusions as he did. He's a liar. Like, I just want to just get him into the room and just debate him. I've debated him like 3 or 4 times, but I would love to just be extra aggressive this time, because that was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That's what I mean. They can't read between the lines. When they read a paper on endogenous retroviral functions, and then the author at the end says, well, these must have been co-opted because evolution's true. You know, their brainwashed way of thinking assumes that that's the correct conclusion, when in fact, we've never seen any co-option. I mean, you get what I'm saying? Like, that was just a ridiculous argument he used.
Well, the ongoing assertions of, well, that's the point we made with Dan tonight. I'm like, bro, your level of assumption is mind blowing. Like, we're accused of God of the gaps, right, on a never ending basis. Well, I don't know if, and ST, I don't know if you were on Smokey's channel when I was talking about this. And I mentioned a little bit on mine of I'm working on the anogs problem, which stands for atheist naturalism of the gap syndrome. And it's like you guys are coming up with some of the most creative, granted, explanations for our very existence. But that doesn't mean that any of them are logical, plausible, or probable.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how to say it any more directly than that, but.
Well, me and you were talking earlier before we went live. You said you remember Dan making a claim about what was the claim you heard him say that you wanted us to refute?
Yeah, he claimed that he produced proteins in the lab, or that's been accomplished by other people or something, and all these other things that that surpass an abiogenesis. That's what I took out of it.
Well, yeah, you're referring to you're talking about what he was saying on Smokey's channel last night. Yeah. That was one of the things I was going to call him out on tonight. But that assertion of we have just put all these amino acids together and gotten biofunction out of it, that completely refuses or just it omits, whether consciously or unconsciously. I mean, he does have a PhD, so, but how are those, in those scenarios he's referring to, what is being used to create those new random sequences? Well, it's not just amino acids bumping into each other. They're literally using ribosomes and other transcription factors to transcribe random sequences that they've created to see what happens. So you're using pre-built machines and translation devices and printers to create outcomes that you claim are the proof of the process to build the machines that you're using. I mean, I honestly don't. That's why I say I don't know how these people take themselves seriously when they make arguments like that. Like, that's what you're arguing. And you know how I know this? Because the process by which amino acids are bound and the bonding, the polypeptides are built, is they're using enzymes which enable the structure of the bond, the chemical bond, to be not completely different, but very different than how we're able to do it manually when we try to do it. Like, the chemical bond is literally different. So that's why I know beyond doubt they're using pre-existing natural systems to do this, or cellular systems to do this, not just hey, let's just connect amino acids. It's a joke. I yield.
Yeah, I think Dan made the claim tonight that Neanderthals were separate from humans, but yet we have the Europeans and Asians have Neanderthal DNA and not Africans. So I don't know how that works. I mean, and we're almost the same thing as Neanderthals anyway to begin with.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of funny. So Ian just gave a super chat. SFT channel rocks. Just saying. So, man, I know you don't like me, but you love the SFT channel. What's going on, dude? What's happening? Can we not? You don't love me too? Just mess with me, man. Ian and I have had some interesting back and forth on comments over on my channel, and on I think on Modern Day Debate as well. But I know SFT and Matt, everybody appreciates your super chats, Ian. keeping things going over here. Praise, what I know you were wanting to get this going tonight. What's some of the craziest things you've heard recently?
Well, it's a lot of it's been on Smokey's channel. I've seen a lot of crazy things there.
Smokey does a great job of extracting the madness, doesn't he?
He does. He's a master. I mean, I enjoy watching his show. He's entertaining, but he's very smart and educational too.
It's did you see any of the craziness that was Ronin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did. That was hilarious.
Logic does not apply to philosophy. Oh man,
you can
science.
leave.
No, it's science. It's science.
Yeah, you made a good point. It's conceptual. Something like science is an abstract. So how could that do it? How could something by itself do something? Actually, do you know that's a fallacy? That's called the fallacy of reification. That's exactly what the fallacy of reification is.
Yeah, I've really never heard anything as like that guy.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I was still listening to him. I was. I had my mic on mute for the majority of that time because I was laughing hysterically at some of the different things that he said. It was just like, is this person actually saying this with a straight face? Like, does he believe this, or is he trolling right now? It was getting to the point of like the lunacy was to such an extent. I'm like, this can't be real. He can't actually be saying this and believing it.
Well, yeah, I've known Ronan for a while. He does the same stuff to Veckel, so Veckel knows well about him. So yeah, he's famous for doing that stuff.
Man, Jungle had some fun on that 12-hour live stream after show. I think I passed out like 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
and
yeah,
you guys,
that's right.
They kept going till like 9 a.m.
Yeah,
And, yeah, that was.
Well,
so tell us about that. Go ahead, Bryce.
I think that was Jason going to speak, but how
Oh,
the
Jason,
hell?
go ahead, man.
How the hell did you get James Tour on your channel, or was
That's
it
all right.
Smokey?
It's all right.
No, Smokey did. Smokey did.
Wow.
Yeah. So the 24th, which I think is Friday. So next Friday, folks, Dr. James Tour, synthetic organic chemist extraordinaire. He's currently at Rice University in Houston, but he is actually one of, and this is not like hyperbole, this is literal. He is one of the most cited chemists on the planet. He has been voted one of the top 50 scientists on the planet. Okay, not in the United States, in the world. He's no joke, and he will be coming on Smokey's channel next Friday, and they will be discussing abiogenesis. Should be very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, good on him.
I was talking to
But,
Ronan and that Peter guy, and I was talking to him until I hit my mic button and knocked out my mic, and then I pulled it out, and then it knocked me off the stream.
What were you saying, Jason?
Yeah.
I don't understand how they can say that Neanderthals and that are hundreds of thousands of years old, even at 1,000 years, even 2,000 years. I find it hard to believe. I find it hard to believe that I know it did, but I find it hard to believe that the bones lasted 4,500 years since the flood without being fossilized. I was listening to the dentist. This dentist, he's a scientist as well. He's studying bones and Neanderthal bones and the structure of their teeth and that. And he's saying that most of the Neanderthal fossils, not all of them, but most of them that they find are only partially fossilized. Like 80%, 60, 70, 80% of them are unfossilized. They're just bone. So that alone is enough to falsify evolution, because bone would turn to dust after 1,000 years unless it's got minerals going through it and it's turned to rock and set in the ground like concrete. It can't last. So how does it last 200,000 years? without turning to
Well,
dust. And
that's why that argument he was using was ridiculous, because then he was forced finally to admit that all these so-called Homo species, right? They say they're different species, and yet he agrees, and evolutionists agree, that they interbred. They're the same species, and the very, very little differences between modern humans and Neanderthals is the result of the inbreeding, the high levels of homozygosity. Like, this isn't really that complicated, and this is all backed up by the secular literature, in which you said about the bones. Yeah, the fact we can find DNA, and DNA degrades so fast. The fact that we can actually get some detectable genetic signatures and sequences from it, and even know that and even conclude that there was inbreeding involved, for example, is fascinating evidence that they clearly didn't exist hundreds of thousands of years ago. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
And yet the Africans don't even have the Neanderthal DNA in them. It's the Europeans and Asians, the Japhethites, that have the Neanderthal DNA.
Yeah, and even with the Africans, they'll say, as evidence for their out of Africa scenario, Dan always points to that there's a higher genetic diversity in African people groups, when in fact we know that they married a lot younger, had kids a lot younger. If some of those people groups were the first to migrate after Babel, and especially if they lived in tribes and just population histories, there's especially, I think it's the Y chromosome, it appears there's higher rates of recombination and gene conversion. That's why Jeanson's predictions on the African people groups are so important right now, because those are future novel predictions to confirm and corroborate the explanations as to why they're slightly more diverse. But still, and Dan agreed with me on this one last discussion. We had a few hangouts ago on John's always amazing after shows. He admits that any two people on this planet, their DNA differences are still pretty few. And that makes sense. If we have fast mutation rates, but only a few DNA differences separating us, logically, scientifically, that only takes us back to common ancestors 6,000-7,000 years ago. That's why they have to always invoke these substitution rates, accuse somebody like Jensen of looking at somatic mutations, or, I mean, there's just rescue device after rescue device. But the empirical data fits our model perfectly. It's crazy.
Hey guys, a quick insertion here. So I just had this idea and decided to Google it. So we're talking about bones, right? So this is in regards to your body after you die. If you have a grave and a casket, which obviously, if you're inside of a freaking casket, you have more protection than if you didn't. If they're just dead, right? So by 50 years in, your tissues will have liquefied and disappeared, leaving behind mummified skin and tendons. Eventually, these too will disintegrate, and after 80 years in that coffin, your bones will crack as the soft collagen inside them disintegrates, leaving nothing but brittle mineral frame behind. But even that shell won't last forever. A century, so 100 years in, the last of your bones will have collapsed into dust, and only the most durable part of your body, your teeth, will remain. In 100 years, inside of a casket, which is obviously protecting you from a lot of stuff.
That's awesome.
I mean, just think about that for a second, folks. Right. We're finding these supposedly super old bones.
Dinosaur bones.
How does that apply?
200,000 years.
Why? I mean, how are our bones going to disintegrate into dust in 100 years? But we're finding bones that are not fossilized, that are supposedly thousands of years old.
I know.
I call BS. I call BS.
They're genetically superior. That's what it was. Their bones are harder and they're more genetically superior. See, that's genetic entropy. That'd be a pretty bad rescue device for them to use.
Got bone cells with filopodia. Got blood cells. You got veins. And dinosaurs.
Yeah. Yeah, and the main thing is that they've got proteins that that bacteria don't produce, and they know it's not contamination because of the stains that they use. The stains show that recently dead tissue or recently dead cells from long dead cells. It distinguishes, so the dye won't color like recently dead cells. So they can't use that as evidence.
But Jason, quick question. How are the Neanderthals, in your opinion, genetically superior if all these papers suggest that they had high levels of homozygosity, they were highly inbred, they're 40% less fit than modern humans?
Well, I just say that because they had an enamel repair mechanism in their teeth, and they clocked one Neanderthal in. They must have been incredible people made in their prime of their genetic, in the prime of their genetics, because they've got one guy in Western Australia that's running through a swamp, through wet mud. He's carrying something heavy. They can tell from the footprints, one side's like leaning. It's like he's carrying something heavy. So he's carrying something heavy, and he's running through a swamp and thick mud, and he's running at, like, I think it was 47 kilometers an hour, something like that, which is just amazing, what I mean? Carrying something heavy, running through thick mud, running at 40-something kilometers an hour.
Well, I guess one way to combine those two theories, that Neanderthals were superior. I mean, they definitely live, because where they're found is post-flood deposits. So for sure they're not pre-flood people. But to hold to both positions, that maybe they were genetically superior human beings, and
is easy.
And the data that suggests that they were highly inbred, genetically compromised, is in post-flood, post-Babel conditions, the environment, I would imagine, would lead to accelerated genetic degeneration on, let's say Neanderthals had those longevity genes. Well, imagine a post-flood conditions that those genes had never been, I guess, experienced in, like, pre-flood conditions, for example. Those genes would probably deteriorate really fast. It's like when somebody goes on a cleanse for years and they haven't had, like, McDonald's or junk food or something like that for a while, and all of a sudden they have it. Typically they get really, really sick. Their body's not used to it, versus somebody who just has kind of junk food all the time. They're not really fazed by it. So I'd imagine the Neanderthals, all this evidence and these papers that suggest they were highly degenerated and had high levels of homozygosity, that probably affected them even more because of their, I guess, superior genetics. I mean, that's my way of kind of combining both theories. What do you think?
Yeah, and also they could have had different populations. Some populations were more inbred than others. And it's another thing, we find Neanderthal all over the world. Isn't that a problem for evolution? Like, we find them in Australia, we find them everywhere.
It is. Yeah, that's why they look to now the multi-regional theory. They say that there is two out of Africas. Erectus left Africa and then evolved independently into Neanderthals, Heidelbergensis, Naledi, Floresiensis. And then whether it was millions of years later or hundreds of thousands of years later, Homo erectus evolved independently in Africa into humans. And then humans left Africa and either took over, killed off all of those so-called subhumans.
I don't believe they did. I believe they interbred.
But they're the same
and assimilated with them. That's their two theories, right? So yeah, you're right. All this data. That's why they now have two theories. They don't really know how to combine them. But with our model of the out of Middle East, it's perfectly compatible with both theories, because Homo sapiens left Babel. Some people groups became isolated, which led to accelerated genetic degeneration. So where they say Homo erectus evolved in all these people groups, the real story is Homo sapiens devolved into all these people groups based on isolation, inbreeding, island dwarfism in some of the cases. So yeah, the Neanderthals could have hypothetically been genetically superior, but those genes would have degenerated and accumulated more mutations because of those genes for longevity. You know, they'd be subject to these negative conditions that would just speed up the degeneration process. So, because there's two different theories, right? There's Jack Cuozzo, who says, hey, they human beings that live to long ages, and then you've got the other side that says, no, they're just genetically compromised human beings. You can combine the both, I think, from what we just talked about there.
Well, you know, what something that really gets me in the context of, you know,
But they found erectus in with Neanderthal. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to look at that video again of that dentist and see what he says. But I'm pretty sure he said they found erectus with Neanderthal or something in the same dig.
And in the Middle East and Israel?
I think it was in Europe. I'm not sure, but I'll have to watch the video again. It's on my timeline. It's on standings as well, I think.
I think they found them in the same grave too.
Yeah, that's right. They something like that. So I mean, that's it. It's done. Oh, but they would have just got washed in. It would have been a local flood that picked up the bones and washed them out of a crevice and then washed them all in together. And that's like their excuse for the Ashley phosphate beds, or one of them.
Unless
No, guys.
Reburied.
Now, guys, you have to really think about this from a truly evolutionary perspective. There was natural process which exhumed the first one from its grave, and then water and a combination of other natural forces somehow moved into a same physical location as this future organism, and then buried them together.
Yeah,
that is what happened.
I forgot about
that. Is the rational conclusion to how
it could happen.
It happened.
But the Pope could walk up the driveway with a case of beer under each arm, want to get drunk and tell dirty jokes all night. That could happen, but it's highly unlikely.
But it could happen.
Yeah, that's right. There's a chance.
and if it was in the 1300s, it probably would happen.
Yeah, that's right.
That is the prebiotic Earth. That's it right there. Just like the Pope walking up with a case of beer. That's prebiotic chemistry, folks. That's how it happened.
So, Jason,
I can't believe they're finding these things buried together, and they're saying that they evolved into one another, and then they turn around and say, oh, but they didn't really evolve into one another. One of their rescue devices is they didn't really evolve into one another, and then the other one is that they came out of Africa, and all the others, the Neanderthal and Denisovans evolved from the rest.
Something real quick before I'm going to shut up here for a while because I'm getting tired. What I find interesting, and to be honest, I oftentimes think that we waste energy arguing over did humans evolve from monkeys rather than focusing on did anything evolve at all.
No, nothing.
Like we argue over like, oh, was there evidence for this? It's like, hey folks, we're not actually arguing over what processes would have had to have occurred in order for us to have evolved from this last common ancestor. And what actually would have had to have occurred, not in a theoretical perspective, but in a real world perspective. Like,
but evolution is a
we would
fact.
have to have 35 million DNA mutations. There's no way around this. Like, this is a fact. This is what the genome is. There's 35 million base pair differences.
Viable mutations.
But evolution's a fact, man. So you just have to accept it.
Viable.
Well, no, but that's my point.
Micro evolution.
Everything that we're arguing is having to counter their assumption. Like, everything about their assumption is evolution is a fact. And what I'm saying is, I think we need to, I do this myself a lot. I'm like, let's argue the validity of your assumption before we argue whether or not there's evidence for it. Let's argue the validity of it.
That's why I don't even accept
it works out to be one. I think it works out to be 1.5 million to 8 million years or something per fixation, per mutation fixation that's passed on through the population. Like, that's what Sanford discovered, something like that. So he worked out that it'd be for an ape to turn from a chimp to a human with the differences that we know of, it would take something like 97 billion years at the current rate.
Billion years.
Yeah, billion. Yeah, not
Yeah,
million, billion.
If it survived.
Who is that guy yelling at Jason and cussing him out? I was like, whoa.
That'd be Dapper Dino's fake account or something.
Yeah, that was Dapper Dino. Hey guys, I'm gonna keep listening, but I was started working at 6:45 in the morning, and
you better go, man.
I'm
Oh
feeling
my
exhausted. I'm gonna
God.
keep listening. Y'all have a great night. Enjoyed it as always.
You too, man.
And,
God bless.
Same
keep
to
it
you,
up, folks.
man.
All right,
Later.
thanks.
See you, mate. See you, John.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the
don't
thing
even-
is, when Dapper... Sorry, mate. Go on, Jungle.
No, I
I'm
just
not in
wanted
any
to
rush.
say before a while back, I wanted to say that I don't even accept microevolution. I don't even microevolution. That doesn't exist to me. I don't accept any evolution whatsoever because there is
Well, that
no
just
mechanism.
means change, yeah. So they reinvent. It's an equivocation. They love using that word to cloak their fantasy.
Yeah. So variation of the same kind, that's not microevolution. It's not evolution of any kind.
Good point. That's actually a good point. Because it goes downwards anyway. I mean, we've seen the traits after they're being reused and reused over and over. It goes down after a while, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's either sideways or backwards. And if you're going sideways and backwards, you're not going forward. So there's no way to get any instruction that would be required for evolution. It's not there.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So that's why we gotta corner him on that. What's the mechanism for evolution? The mechanism is copying errors, and they don't have copying errors to generate any written instruction whatsoever.
Well,
Boom.
just go and get a page. Go and get any page out of a book, rip it out, and start blanking out letters, and then or whiting them out and writing a different letter in between,
Right.
and just do that randomly, or even through the whole book. Just do that randomly. You change 1,000 letters in an encyclopedia, it's going to mean nothing, or even maybe 100,000 letters. It still might be able to function and be readable. But sooner or later, you keep changing it and keep deleting stuff and mixing stuff around, and you cannot tell me that is ever going to make that encyclopedia better with more complex information and more information. That is exactly what they're saying. That is exactly what they're proposing. That we just go in with whiteout, Tipex. We white out a few letters here on every page and write a different letter in, and just keep doing that like randomly throughout the entire encyclopedia. And if you keep doing that over say 1,000 years or 100 years of doing that every day, just a little bit, that's going to make that into a completely different novel, just as complex, but a completely different encyclopedia about different things. It's completely insane. It does not make any logical sense how mistakes can produce coherent information. And then they say it's not information, it's not a language, it's not a code. It can be read forwards and backwards. Their own evolutionary scientists describe it as being decoding and reading codes and decoding. That's what they describe. They describe it.
And it turns out there's 21 different codes in different organisms. Different organisms have different codes.
You mean like front-loaded genetic diversity, where God put it up? God put us in us with the epigenome, like the epigenetics. Is they're starting to incorporate it now in evolution, that epigenetics works hand in hand with the mutation selection mechanism.
Yeah,
it doesn't. You've got bull terriers from 1932 to 1975, and they've got 3 pictures from 1932 to 1950 to 1975 of the British bull terrier skull, and you see the change, the massive change just in that time in the shape of the skull. I mean, that's epigenetic regulation.
But that's foresight anyway, though, because I mean, epigenetics works off of.
That's right, it is.
Pre-existent programming. I mean, that's
of course it is.
That's
it's
intelligent
the best foresight there is.
Yeah,
but it's the best foresight there is, because it doesn't just look forward. It waits until you have certain environmental and dietary pressures put upon it that cause it to change, that cause cause the genes to express themselves in different ways. That's just absolutely brilliant. I mean, how did evolution evolve that process? It had to have it all in place at once, not just this little part evolved and this tiny little part evolved and that part evolved, and slowly build up to this incredibly complex genome that can recognize different environmental factors. If you've got more oxygen, less oxygen. I mean, why do you think athletes train at thousands of feet above sea level? They train at thousands of feet above sea level because it makes their lungs grow bigger, not massively bigger, but enough where when they come back down to sea level, that they're taking in way more oxygen than the other athletes. So it's a little bit like a performance enhancing drug without the actual drug. I mean, we can trick our genomes into doing things like that, and it just kills the mutation selection mechanism.
Somebody was tonight saying that our genome doesn't respond to the environment individually, and I was about ready to jump on that.
DNA methylation, go for it.
Yeah, I was about ready to jump on it, and Dan says, "Wait, save it."
Yeah, no, it's yes, it does. It's your own scientists admit it. I mean, they're doing tests on this stuff now. They're starting to work out some of the mechanisms behind this stuff. It's epigenetic. Yes, it does. You start eating a different, like for instance, Matt said to me once. He said, if you want to do something good for your body, he said every morning when you get up, he said eat for 8 hours. And don't eat for 16 and fast for 16. You can eat for 8 hours every day, no problem, but stop at 16. And what you do is you take some turmeric and you put some cracked black pepper in it on an empty stomach. And because the cracked black pepper holds it in your stomach longer. And if you do that and eat for 8 and then fast for 16 and take turmeric every day, like once a day, just a good dose once a day of turmeric. You don't want to take it lots of times during the day, and maybe some ginger. Well, you'll switch on your longevity genes and switch off bad genes. You'll switch off bad genes and switch on good ones. I mean, this is well known and well recognized. So whoever said that is completely ignorant of the fact that it's well recognized now, that they know that epigenetics is for real. That's why they're starting to incorporate it into evolution, because it's either incorporate it or die, as it is with a lot of things.
Well, it's a secular religion, and if that goes, then the whole thing goes for all secularists. They have to admit that God exists, and that's just a huge problem for godless people.
Yeah, and one of their arguments is that even if evolution wasn't true, that doesn't mean there's a God.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I've heard that. I was like, what are you smoking? Of course it means there's a God or a creator.
Yeah. It's like, that's what's keeping people from God, is thinking that there's evolution.
Right. But, so I guess aliens, but then and then you're just back to the same problem that created the aliens, and it's like, it's infinite regress, so.
Yeah, that's right. You can't have, if you put off Richard Dawkins. I got the video on my timeline. Richard Dawkins said that it's possible that some alien race seeded Earth that evolved through some inexplicable Darwinian mechanism. So you can't put it off. You can't say, okay, well, we were seeded by aliens that themselves had to evolve with the same problems that we've got. So it
doesn't explain evolution. Doesn't prove evolution.
No, there's only two choices, unfortunately, for the people. I know they come up with all these different dimensions and different universes and all this sort of stuff, but there's only two main. It's either evolution, and this is what people don't understand, is it's only between evolution and creation, special creation. There is no third option. It is just all the other options are eliminated. So it all boils down to just two.
Yeah.
Evolution or creations. You got the choice on two sides. If you take the alien side, then you're taking the evolution side. It's as simple as that.
It's either creation or it's magic.
Yeah. Well, they would say what God did was magic, but God hates magic, and he says so.
No, well, God creating, that's infinite possibilities in limited time and space. That's what defines God.
I suppose God hates magic. I suppose God hates magic because it's a perversion of what he does. It's what demons do, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's illusion. And magic is more down to illusion. It can be some physical traits there, or physical manifestations as well, but it's mostly illusion, and that's why God hates it. What God does do is not magic. It's not a physical illusion.
That's why Moses' serpent ate the other serpents, the magician's serpents.
Yeah, that's right. The serpent opened up and ate because they were basically an illusion. Well, when God created that snake out of the pole, that wasn't an illusion. That was actually a real snake. However he did it, we don't know, but it's a real snake. So it's a perversion. Whatever the devil does or Satan does is a perversion of God's word, and that's where the word magic comes from. It's got nothing to do with God uses magic and they use magic. Well, God uses his power, and they pervert his power that he gave them. Because you think about it, the devil couldn't operate unless God allowed him to. I mean, unless God could just wipe all demons and everything off the face of the earth. There's a reason for all of this. I mean, I don't like it. I don't like the world the way it is, and I don't like a lot of things about it. But the fact is, we all have to suffer. Since Adam's fall, we're all suffering. We're all suffering. And if you do have faith, and this is what it says in the Bible, see, your lifespan on this earth, even if you live for 500 years, compared to eternity, is less than an atom in the entire universe. It's nothing. It's just way less. You live for such a short time, and all we can think about is our present predicament, and we're completely consumed with it. But it says in the Bible that one day all of your tears and pain will be washed away forever. That's for eternity. It doesn't say if you have faith and you struggle through. I mean, look what Jesus Christ went through. He was, and the apostles, they were harassed, they were hounded, they were tortured and brutally murdered in different ways. Jesus Christ himself was brutally murdered. What about this earth in the Bible does it ever say that everything's supposed to be a rosy bowl of happiness, and it's all sitting around arm in arm singing Kumbaya, my Lord? Well, where does it show that? That's what happened in the beginning, before the fall. That's the way it would have been. If Adam never fell and they never ate from that tree, we'd all still be here today. We'd still be here on the earth, but we'd be living in perfect harmony with God and nature. And so
evolution just makes it worse. Evolution is the cause of all kinds of pain and suffering, is because of belief in evolution, and it keeps science.
It's not just evolution. It's the belief that there is no gods. There's 1,763 wars, major wars, that have been waged across the course of human history. Only 123 of those wars can be considered religious in nature, and that comes from an encyclopedia of all wars by Philip and Axelrod. Yeah. And if you look, those guys are atheists. Yeah. And so they only categorize one. So there you go. There's 1,623 wars that have been waged across the course of human history by people before evolution, the word evolution was ever invented, but by people who believed there was no gods.
Yeah.
That there was no punishment in the afterlife.
So Alex Cox has a question if you guys want to answer it.
Yeah.
He asks, could the Neanderthal be related to the Rephaim?
If they existed before the flood.
We don't know. If we start getting into making predictions like retrodictions or whatever they call them like that in the past, then we know better than the evolutionists. I mean, we can't. We should never ever say that we think that mutation rate was like this in the past, and we've got this phylogenetic study where we put all this imaginary stuff together and imagine that's the way it is. Well, unless you can go back and test it, no. But anyway, sorry. What was his question again? I got off the point and I forgot.
Could the Neanderthal be related to the Rephaim?
Well, we're all related to every. Who are the Rephaim? Is he talking about the giants?
Yeah.
The giants, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, the giants. Well, look at the size of Denisovans. The average height of a Denisovan would have been mind-blowing. And like, say, the average... Okay, let me say it this way. They found a whole lot of skeletons in the Middle East. Sorry, in America. Sorry, they found a whole lot of skeletons of these people, which the Smithsonian bought them all up, by the way, and made them disappear. But these people, the average height of the woman was 7 foot tall, and the average height of the men was 8 foot tall. And that was the average height, and they were tall, white, with red hair. And they were extremely violent and dangerous. Now, you think about it, if the average height is 7 and 8 feet, then you can imagine, like today, we get the average height is about 6 feet, 5.5, 6 feet. Whereas today we get the odd 7 foot tall and taller. So can you imagine getting the odd freak back with those guys that were the men were 8 feet tall, and you get the odd freak that's like 2 or 3 taller, 2 or 3 feet, 9 foot, 10 feet, 11 feet tall. You could conceive, and not to mention these women had a chest width. The bone in their chest was 26 inches. The average man today is about 15 or 12 to 17 inches across. And this average woman from these mounds that they dug up, and they dug up many of these women, the average chest size. So this basically, cut a long story short, they were the size of Arnold Schwarzenegger. These women could have probably beat Arnold Schwarzenegger to death in his prime without even thinking about it. So we've got these people that lived in America with the Indians, and the Indians hated them. There was legends they ended up getting all the tribes together and attacking them and wiping them out. However they did that, I can't remember. They locked them all in a cage, and then they got them all while they were all in a cave, asleep or something, and built a big fire out the front and lit the fire and sucked all the air out of the cave. Well, when they went into this cave to dig up bat crap, they found something like, I think it was 5 or more. I think it was 5 to 7 skeletons in there, and all of them were massive, like 7 foot tall. You say, well, 7 foot tall is not that big, but that's the average height. I mean,
yeah, that's Heidelbergensis too, and these were people that were eating the other humans too, so they were cannibalistic.
Yes,
look it up. It's
and their sexual habits.
Yeah,
and have a look at Indian sexual habits, how bad they were. And the Indians said their sexual habits made them sick. So,
oh man,
these were bad people, mate.
Yeah.
So how does evolution account for that? Like, what makes Heidelbergensis be cannibalistic?
Well,
I don't think
we don't know. We don't know, but all we know is that God said in the Bible that he didn't like the giants. And there was even one time where God said, they're just too big and dangerous, and I'm going to go ahead of you and I'm going to wipe them out for you, or something like that in the Bible. So God didn't like them. However they came about, I don't know for sure. No one really does. That's why there's so much argument over it. But all I know is that they were there. Wherever they were, I'm not going to speculate. I think it's biblically unsound to say that angels had sex with people, because why would God give them sexual organs and sperm and seed, basically, the way to produce? I don't understand why they would need that. Anyway, but I don't know. All I know is that they did exist, and there's lots of things in the Bible that we don't understand, lots of things. And it's okay to say God did it, because they invoke their God, the God of nothing, which created everything. And they have to do this because anybody that argues that the universe is eternal is insane, because there's only two ways to say that it's like first of all, you've got the beginning of the Big Bang where it just started off, and then you've got the yo-yo effect where it comes back in on each other. It crunches down to a point smaller than an atom with all the mass of the universe in it, and then expands again. And then it's sort of like the yo-yo effect, back and forwards, up and down. You know what I mean? It's like anyway, we don't know. We just don't know, and for sure. But we don't need to know, because the Bible, it's like kinds. They always go on about kinds. What's a kind then? Well, God didn't even need Noah to know what the kinds were. He said, "I'll bring them to you." Noah didn't have to go to university for 8 years to sit down and learn all the different kinds, and then spend the next 100 and something years going and rounding up all these different kinds and bringing them to the ark. God brought them. So we didn't need to know. So with this stuff where they say, oh, well, what about the bat? That's heaped in with, well, we don't know God's classifications. And the Bible wasn't written as a scientific textbook. It was written as it is scientifically accurate, but but it wasn't written as a scientific textbook. It was written so man could learn how to have a relationship with God. And basically God handed down 615 laws. Man said, oh, well, I want to be equal with God, and I want to, then I'm so good and I'm so great. Well, God goes, okay, smarty pants, I'm going to give you the laws that I live by, 600 odd laws. I'm going to give them to you. And then you go and live by those laws perfectly every single day, and then you can claim to be good. Well, those laws were given to man to show him how inadequate and useless he is, because not one man could even live by 10 of those laws, the 10 commandments, let alone the whole 600 and something laws. Impossible. Not once. Anybody that claims they can live by those laws is the greatest liar that ever lived. So it's with their evolution. And
Yeah, we got to wrap this up because I gotta.
Yeah, I know.
I gotta
we
get
gotta
up
go.
early.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants
Yeah.
to say something
Alright.
before we get going, go ahead, and then we'll probably close it up.
Sorry.
Oh no, this has been good, great discussion. Good job. Is SFT there? Or is he out?
He'd be out, man. He's tired. He only got a couple of hours sleep last night. He's been busy as anything. So
oh, man.
yeah, he's out. John's got to get up. John works like 18 hours a day some days. So he works just I don't even know how he gets the time to go live. Even if I worked like John, you'd never see me.
Yeah, I just want to say that I have a discussion with Dan tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you want to watch it, it's on his channel, Creation Myths.
Okay.
Nice.
You know, this, in
All
case
right,
anybody
well,
wants to watch that.
I have to get his channel. I have to go and thing and subscribe to it.
If not, I'll try to copy it. I don't know if I still have the ability to copy. I used to have the ability to copy the channel. I don't know if I can do that no more.
You're gonna get challenged, so I think you'll be ready to defend yourself, though.
Yeah, well, I mean, I went and studied for it. I even did a hangout and looking for the evidence of evolution. There's no evidence of evolution. They don't have any mechanism. There's no mechanism for evolution. How can there be evolution? And you know,
they don't know.
But I got a bunch of
mechanisms.
papers. I got a bunch of real papers to study up on what the facts actually are. That
Just before we go, just quickly, Jungle, just remember this. In the beginning, they say with their thing that a quantum fluctuation popped the magic dot in. The magic dot started expanding 20 billion times, about 20 billion times faster than the speed of light. It expanded to the size of our solar system every 20 billionth of a second. And it within the first 3 minutes, it grew to the size of 100,000 light years. That's what they say. So you know, they can invoke their God. So sometimes it's just okay to say, well, we don't know that, and God did it, but we don't know how he did it, because they say, you know, their God, nothing did it, and they don't know how they did it. Sorry, Jargon, I won't cut you off again.
No, that's good. Except Dad's going to be focusing on biology probably. And so I'm just going to have to bring up some the information here. Because Otangelo gave me a whole bunch of paper. I got a whole bunch of papers from Otangelo that have the real evidence of what the facts are in biology, you know, which you don't learn from evolution.
All right, guys, we're going to have to close this up now. I'm pre-sharing one in the chat for.
Yeah, that's it.
Sorry. Yeah, this has been a great discussion and
cutting you off.
That's okay. I think you're in tomorrow, aren't you? What day is it today over there?
Monday.
It's Monday. Okay.
Yeah.
Monday,
late
late
Tuesday
Monday,
tomorrow.
Right? Tuesday tomorrow.
Yeah, it's your Monday tomorrow.
Yeah,
no, it's only 10 to 20 to 5.
Oh well,
in the
here
afternoon.
it's Monday morning here, 2 a.m. Almost 3 a.m.
Yeah, that's all right then. All right, well, so we creation myths tomorrow. Did you say?
Yeah, it's
At what time?
8 Eastern. I think it's something like 2.
Or today for you, not tomorrow.
GMT.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
it's 8 p.m. Eastern time.
8 p.m. tonight. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
all right, guys. Thanks for everyone in the chat for showing up and good interaction. So we'll be back later. Team SFT over and